Brian, though, Jimmy Cook with you here. We're going to make magic happen. I think we're only going up from here, Jimmy. I got stopped by Johnny Law right before the show here, and I escaped. It was okay. Everything's all good.
You made it out penalty-free. I'm proud of you.
Made it out. I went the wrong way on what turned out to be a one-way right before the circle over here.
Like a Drake song. Well done.
Yeah. And I go down, I think it was Market Street. Market Street, for the people who are unaware, one way.
There you go.
One way out, not in. I went in.
No way out in that regard.
Yeah, and I went straight toward a police officer that was sitting there in case any riffraff like me were to emerge. And so it's funny, I got right up there, and I'm like, man, this is a tight fit. And as we were going, I'm like, yeah, I think this is a one-way. I think it's only for one vehicle. And we get up there, the guy has stopped, and he goes, I can't remember exactly, but he's like, what are you doing? And I'm like, yeah, sorry. He's like, why are you the only one going this way? And I'm like, I don't know, man.
It's a great question.
It's a great question. I didn't know. And he's like, turn around and go back where you came from. I was like, all right, okay, cool, yeah. So I did a U-turn and went back. And actually, it was right walking distance from the studio here. I just got out and walked the rest of the way, and it's all good.
You said it was tight to get through there, though. I feel like it would then be complicated to achieve said U-turn.
Yeah. It was. Absolutely it was. And I said that. I was like, you want me to do a U-turn right here? And the look on his face was like, yes, that's absolutely what I want you to do. You might want to stop talking right now, or it could be a whole thing. And so I got the message, and I'm like, okay, U-turn it is. And I got out, walked the rest of the way. It's all good. But, yeah, my bad on that. I didn't see any sign. I was just in Orlando, Jimmy. Just went with my girlfriend to Disney World, and it was very similar. Literally, just yesterday. I think we were leaving Chick-fil-A. Shout out. And tight fit. I thought the road was closed. There was construction, and then another car from the other direction went on this little sliver of a road that's available on the opposite side. Okay. And I'm like, oh, okay, I guess it is open. So maybe I had that in the back of my head. That I thought it was still going to be available there, but not the case. Not the case.
At least, like I said, no tickets were handed out, and you made it here okay.
All is well. All is well, but yeah, I did not know. I was in the dark on that one, so whatever.
At least it didn't hit you with one of those, well, you should have known. I mean, just because you don't know doesn't make it okay. You know, sometimes you'll get that from Johnny Law every now and again.
You know what? I've got a story about that, Jimmy, here real fast before we get into mock draft territory. It's pretty interesting. We got a lot of NFL draft, certainly some hoops. Tyrese Halliburton going viral for defending Jordan Poole's 28-footer that went begging last night against the Lakers. But yeah, a quick story. So this is back in South Bend, Indiana. And we're on the highway, and everybody is exiting the highway. Everybody. And it was just strange because there wasn't a cop car in front of the exit.
Okay.
There was like a utility vehicle a good 1, 2, 3 football fields before the exit. And so we go past this utility vehicle. Everybody's exiting, and I'm like, do we all have to exit? I'm not quite sure. And so I'm like, maybe not. And so I was the one idiot that kept going straight. Johnny Law immediately lights me up.
Blue and whites.
I'm like, hey, man, sorry. I really didn't know. And he's like, why are you the only one? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know why all these other people were doing that, and I was the only idiot. I don't know. And he said something to the effect of, he did give me a ticket, and he was walking away, and he goes, yeah, there's a possible fatality down the road, but not that you would care about that.
Ooh,
I'm like, dude.
That's tough.
Come on, man. Like, I really didn't know. Do you think I was like, yeah, dead guy, whatever. I got to get to the meeting on time. Come on, dude. Really?
That's brutal.
That was bad. But you know something that's good here? The Dane Brugler 2024 NFL mock draft, Jimmy. I'm not going to go pick by pick, but there are some interesting developments over here. Let's start with the hometown team, the Indianapolis Colts, projected to have the number 3 overall pick. Now, listen, we know the the drill in the NFL. There are crazy swings. Hopefully the Colts are off and running, have a better season than expected. But as of right now, in range to have the number 3 overall pick. I'd like let's pause for a second and think about that. Think about the season that would be if the Colts end up with the number 3 overall pick after the 2023 season. I mean, what do you think we're talking about if that's the case?
4 wins?
Yeah, certainly, but play on the field, Anthony Richardson, what does he look like? Are there at least some flashes? I'm just playing the if game.
Right.
If the Colts are 3rd in the draft order, it's going to be obviously a long season, and that would tend to indicate a long year for Anthony Richardson as well, which wouldn't be a shocker. He's a Daisy Fresh rookie. It's going to take some time.
There's one of two paths in my mind. Either they started him from the get-go, and there were ups and downs, growing pains, how the 4 wins look. But yes, they were what you just mentioned, which is it's not rainbows and butterflies out of the gate. Hopefully, you would hope that there's no area for growth, improvement, and you're happy with the selection you've made. The other path would be they went with Minshew to start, and either Minshew played out the whole season, and this is the same team that it was a year ago, or maybe they gave Richardson the reins middle of the season. He got into a couple wins, but again, the growing pains were there. Not a level of positivity, but a very, I would say, realist outlook if you were just guessing, hey, would this type of thing surprise you next year? No, it would not.
Right. No, it wouldn't shock me either. And with the 3rd pick, well in advance, they always say the way too early 2024 mock, but it just gives you a rough indication of maybe how things would go. Dane Brugler has the Colts taking a Penn State left tackle. Now think about that. Just let that sink in for a second. Long year. Most likely numerous growing pains with Anthony Richardson / Clay Richardson, because he's clay that can be molded according to you guys. And then they go left tackle in the top 5. Like that. I keep on hearing patience. You hear the same thing from the Colts organization, and that makes sense. But I'll tell you what, Jimmy, patience will be tested big time this next season. And we talked about this right before the show. Patience means different things for different people in the Colts organization. The patience that the organization's going to have with Anthony Richardson, with Shane Steichen, it's different than the level of patience they're going to have with Chris Ballard.
Yeah, you would assume with this being year 6 for Chris Ballard, he just finished his 6th draft, that at this point in time, even with the new head coach, there's a timer there in Jim Irsay's mind in terms of the way the roster is being built. That's not to say that it'd be a mid-season firing if they lost 10 games out of the gate or something like that, but there's definitely more pressure there because he's the oldest guard of that trio, and that's why I find it fascinating that in his mind, and I don't necessarily disagree with him, you need to temper expectations with what Richardson can be out of the gate because of how raw he is. And then the other side of that coin is Shane Steichen / to some extent Jim Irsay of this is the shiny new toy. This is the guy that I want for my offense. Let's throw him out there right away. How do those heads butt? What's the ultimate decision in 4 months' time?
That's the wild thing to me is, what's it going to take for Chris Ballard to still be the GM going into the 2024 draft? I think it's not going to be a bunch of wins this year. That would help, but I don't foresee that being the case. I foresee a lot of growing pains. So what would it take? I think it would take numerous examples of Anthony Richardson showing that he can be the guy. Certainly not going to be a finished product, lots of growing pains. But do you see enough to say there's something there? There's a realistic belief that he can be our franchise quarterback. I think if you see realistic flashes, I'm just talking flashes here for Anthony Richardson, that might be enough for Ballard to keep his job. But if it's losses piling up for a second straight year and not enough progress or flashes from Anthony Richardson, I don't know. I don't know if he's going to be around for one more draft, Jay Cook.
You also need, Richardson is the main piece here. We all know that. Any draft grade that we've reviewed or talked about or discussed is given out and based on the idea that Richardson's going to pan out into the elite of the elite in the AFC. That's why the Colts have such a high draft grade. But it's accompanied with the fact that they do have a largely athletic class, a lot of talented specimens across the board. Like Juju Brents, you assume he's going to start right away at a thin position at corner. If he is able to be a bright spot for that defense, be a shining example in that regard. The same thing with Josh Downs. If he takes a starting job right away and it's clear he fits within this offense and Ballard is building things the right way, that I think needs to be incorporated along with your main point of you need flashes from Richardson. You also need to have faith in this draft class that Ballard is still the right architect that is designing the Shane Steichen era.
You know what else is tough? Brian Noe and Jimmy Cook with you here, 93.5, 107.5, The Fan. Take it a step further with the mock draft. Mm-hmm. Again, we're just shy of 12 months away.
The countdown is on.
The next draft. But Brugler has the Arizona Cardinals with the number 1 overall pick and the number 2 overall pick. And what will be also challenging is where this is headed. What would make it even tougher to stomach if Anthony Richardson has a really tough season individually while the Colts have a really tough season team-wise, and you've got Caleb Williams maybe going number 1 overall to the Arizona Cardinals. Think about this with the Cardinals. They get 2 cracks at it to have the number 1 overall pick. They're probably going to have a rough year themselves with Kyler Murray missing however many games he's out. And the Texans are going to suck to the high heavens, right? They've got a shoddy roster at best. So they've got 2 chances to have the number 1 overall pick. There's a chance that they have number 1 and number 2. This mock draft, Brugler's got the Cardinals taking Caleb Williams and Marvin Harrison Jr.
Say it ain't so. Because that's the Colts fans can say that they don't care about 2024, and it's fine. Like, I don't really either. I know we're just doing this because it is good to take a peek at what Brugler has, and he is as good as anybody, and man, will he ever get some sleep. But Marvin Harrison Jr. is the pipe dream of every Colts fan, right? For a number of different reasons, the primary one being his dad had a pretty good career here.
Yep.
Not too bad. And he looks like that he is going to be an heir apparent to that throne, at least in terms of what he's doing at Ohio State. So you would love for a dream scenario for him to somehow end up in Indianapolis. Will they be bad enough for that to happen? And again, that's a conversation for another day. You'd rather see strides and growth from your quarterback than you would the opportunity to just go get Marvin Harrison Jr. But that's sad to see. That I wasn't ready to have that brought into my life here in May.
It's sobering, isn't it?
It is.
Because I get it. Hey, Colts fans are excited. It symbolizes hope and maybe a new frontier if we're lucky enough. I get all of that stuff. But, I mean, you got to be realistic as well. Yeah. You know, I hate to be waking people from the dream that they're enjoying right now, but I'm just saying this. It's going to be tougher for Chris Ballard potentially to keep his job if this plays out the way it's projected. If the Colts end up with the number 3 overall pick, they lost a bunch of games. Anthony Richardson probably didn't play great. And it's coupled with Caleb Williams probably going number 1 overall. Drake May maybe going in the top 5. And it's gonna be even more, it's gonna be tougher to stomach from the Colts' perspective of like, man, because you know the way it goes. The new draft class, these are the bright new shiny toys. And Caleb Williams is gonna have a great season at SC. Drake May is probably gonna have a great season at North Carolina. And you're gonna hear the Gregorian chant when they're named.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Not a singer, but you get it.
Sure.
It's going to make it even tougher for the Colts not to look at Chris Ballard like, we're losing ground over here. I'll say this, Jimmy. I would much rather be in the Arizona Cardinals spot than the Colts spot right now. By leaps and freaking bounds. Are you kidding me? Like, timing matters. Who was... remember when LeBron went number 1 overall? Mm-hmm. And then the Cavs, a while later, got Anthony Bennett number 1 overall.
Tough.
Like, I mean, sometimes the draft, when you're at the top of it, you just hit a grand slam and it works out. Other times you're like, man, this is the top guy. Like Caleb Williams and Drake May, those guys are better prospects than anybody in this current draft class.
I am not going to go as far to this point to say that I would rather be Arizona because the draft is so like not that far behind us in terms of what the Colts just did. And also, and this might be, something that I've cooked up in terms of too strong of a take for you being back with us today.
Uh-huh.
It won't happen next year. Thank you. I appreciate that. It won't happen next year, but if Richardson reaches where he is projected to breach, and that doesn't mean anything, he has to prove it on the field. If he does, I don't know how much buyer's remorse the Colts will have when the 3 years pass of what they could have maybe had if they had a bad season to get Caleb Williams next year versus the act of taking Richardson right now. Also, the Cardinals, not that they couldn't take Caleb Williams, right? It's easy to take a rookie quarterback. What do they decide to do with Kyler Murray? They still have that headache on their hands. It's an easy reset button if you just take Caleb Williams and trade Kyler Murray to the highest bidder or, cut him at a loss or do whatever. I'd rather have the Colts path because of maybe it's the hope, maybe it's what Richardson could be. I also don't want another season of unknown of will we be bad enough to get that pick? Yeah. Are we going to have to worry about games in week 16 or 15 or 17 to be able to get Caleb Williams? And if we don't, then all of a sudden you're where the Texans were, where you missed out on the opportunity to get Bryce Young and you're sitting there twiddling your thumbs. So,
listen, it's a very tricky painting.
It is.
To go with because, man, there are landmines all over this one for it to be misunderstood.
Right.
But what I'm really saying is I'm not faulting the Colts necessarily for doing what they did because we've talked about it. Are there any guarantees that the Colts would bottom out enough to have the number 1 overall pick to get Caleb Williams or to be in range to get one of those top 2 guys? There's no guarantee. So I'm not really pointing the finger at the Colts and being like, you morons, like, why would you do this? But it's one of those deals where I don't know. It's I don't know what the best example would be. Maybe it's your ex moves on and she's happier. It's like, oh man, that's kind of rough over there. Like, when the Arizona Cardinals, if they land Caleb Williams and he turns out to be what they're projecting him to be, some are saying he's a refined Mahomes.
I've seen that.
That's a little much right there. But let's just say he's the real deal. He's a top 5 quarterback in the NFL in short order. And meanwhile, Rich, it's a process over here. Like, it's going to be tough not to look at a better situation like, man, I wish that was us. That's as far as I'm taking it. I'm not saying the Colts screwed it up.
Right.
I'm saying it'd be hard to look at a better situation and not say, man, it sucks it's not us.
Yeah, I mean, and that's to be human. That's to be a sports fan. Like, I don't disagree with that in any capacity. And also, I guess if you're taking solace in this exercise of 12 months from now, at least it's not Houston. At least Houston is taking a different path to the point that they're out of the Caleb Williams sweepstakes effectively, barring the Browns going 2-16 because they still have that first rounder, and I guess there's still a path for them to get in the top 3 next year because of that. But at least it's not in division, I guess. So that's all you can be happy about.
Something else with this 2024 mock. And it's not to just fast forward to next year. It's like all of this stuff pertains to 2023 as well.
Right.
Like it's both years combined. But what else is interesting, something that caught my eye, not only Marvin Harrison Jr. going with the number 2 overall pick, Emeka Egbuka, another wide receiver from Ohio State. Dane Brugler has him going 28th overall to the Bengals. If that happens, if Marvin Harrison Jr. and Egbuka are both first-round picks, that means C.J. Stroud would have had, at minimum, 5 first-round wide receivers in his 2 years at Ohio State. 5 first-rounders! And those moron Texans just traded all that draft capital for Will Anderson Jr., who might be good. Some are skeptical. Some say, hey, I don't see the burst. I don't see the bend. I don't see him overpowering left tackles. Some of that was him just coming off a block and making a play. So there's some skepticism that he's going to be a game wrecker. We'll see how it goes.
You could have had him at 3 instead of.
And they trade all that. They might have traded the number 1 overall pick and then some. Like a 3rd rounder, their first, a 2nd, like all that for Will Anderson Jr. When C.J. Stroud, he's used to a who's who in terms of his supporting cast. I think that is great news for the Colts. I think the Texans are stumbling drunk to do what they did.
Yeah, I was never that aggressive on Stroud, but the path they took on draft night, no, I can't make a decision one way or the other, because at a minimum, if you're making the argument, well, Stroud needs weapons, yeah, if you're fast forward to 2024, boy, it'd be nice to have the second overall pick and be able to go get Marvin Harrison Jr. and pair him up with his college teammate. That'd be great.
Yeah.
It's likely off the table now because you decided, we want our quarterback and we want what we think is the next Aaron Donald in terms of dominance on the defensive end, and you had to give up a lot of capital to go do it.
Yeah. Yeah, and the thing is, we were talking about this right before the show began, and the turnover with these rosters. When we look at the 3 guys who were just drafted, QBs in the AFC South, what their rosters will look like over the next 3-4 years, it's going to be night and day. There's going to be so much turnover. Where, good example, going back to this 2024 mock draft from Dane Brugler, shout out The Athletic. You know who's got the Dolphins taking at 23rd overall?
Who we got?
Michael Penix Jr., the quarterback from Washington.
Wow.
So just think about that.
The former Hoosier.
With Tua and the concussion issues, and he's got the Fins going QB. And listen, who knows? Hopefully Tua is healthy and everything like that. But it could go in that direction. And so if you bring it back to the AFC South, and we're looking at these guys, Will the Thrill Levis, Anthony Richardson, CJ Stroud, who's going to be in the best position possible over the next 4 or 5 years? Jimmy, your guess is as good as mine because those rosters are going to look so dramatically different 4 or 5 years from now. It's going to be insane.
The thing that we talked about yesterday, and Will Haskett was in here, and you and I talked about it, like you mentioned before we started the show, is the top weapon for any of these guys, but in particular, staying local with Richardson in the passing game is not there yet. It's not. How it becomes, if it's through the draft, if it is, Josh Downs all of a sudden turns into Tyreek Hill, okay, great, maybe you found it that way. But what you've seen in the last 3 or 4 years is these big-time acquisitions to go get a weapon for star wide receivers to try to take them to the next level. We highlighted this yesterday. A.J. Brown and Jalen Hurts. Stephon Diggs and Josh Allen. Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase. They go out and get a top wide receiver instead of going and getting offensive line help for him. That's going to have to be done at some point right now on this roster. I'm not saying you can't see another leap from Michael Pittman Jr., and I hope you do, because I was calling for it last year. I wanted number 1 wideout-like numbers from Michael Pittman Jr., and it was never going to happen solely based on who was throwing to him. I'm not saying that he's shown time and time again that he can be that, but I do. I hope that he is into that same vein of number 1 wideouts across the league. But if he's not, that's the bigger issue with Anthony Richardson is what is the build going to be around him in terms of weapons? What's the build going to be around with CJ Stroud, Will Levis, etc.? They're not there yet. Look at Trevor Lawrence. We talked all the time about Urban Meyer was the biggest problem there, and I don't think there's a big argument to say that it wasn't. Doug Peterson totally changed the culture there, but they also went out and aggressively got weapons at wide receiver, and they were laughed at when they did it. I still don't necessarily agree with the money long term, but it worked.
Yeah. No, they definitely upgraded the talent around him. And that's the other thing. We go back to the patience thing. What's the patience going to look like for any of these rookie quarterbacks? Let's say Richardson stumbles a little bit. I mean, let's suspend reality and say Will struggles a little bit.
Sure.
Like,
or even wins the job. Tannehill might still be there fighting him off for it. So.
But, the patience trickles down to personnel decisions. Yep. Michael Pittman Jr. and Alec Pierce, they might be looking and saying, I was wide open. Like, give me the ball, Rook, Yeah. And so the way the roster is shaped will have a lot to do with the performances of your teammates. And Richardson, if he doesn't hit the ground running, which most rookie quarterbacks don't do, especially someone that is lacking experience the way he is. 393 passes in college, it's not a lot of experience. Yeah. So I'm curious how that goes as well. Because that's a tough game to play of, hey, we think this receiver is a difference maker, although his stats were really down, and it's absolutely tied to we had a rookie trying to throw him the ball and figure stuff out on the fly. That's not an easy evaluation.
Bears also did it this offseason, right? They go out and get DJ Moore. Again, I'm not as high on DJ Moore as others, but they went and got a weapon. They got a weapon for their quarterback, and that is what's fascinating about roster construction in the league. It's why, as fans, if you play Madden or if you enjoy football simulators, it's why you love the roster construction of things, of getting to play GM for yourself. And that is the boat the Colts are in right now, is it is basically throw all the expectations of yesteryear out the door. This is a true new chapter in the Colts franchise. How will they work to build around their quarterback? I was at least happy they came away with a wide receiver. I like Downs for where they got him and what he could potentially do for the offense. But ultimately, and this goes back to the question of where is patience versus, throwing him to the fire. I don't think this will happen with Minshew, but if I'm Pittman Jr. or I'm Alec Pierce and the throws still aren't like the type of throws that I think can unlock what I can do it as a receiver with Minshew under center, I would start to get a little frustrated and be like, hey, why can't we see what the kid throwing 60-yard bombs in practice has? I'd like to go get a go ball from him.
Well, and that's the thing. It can work both ways. Yeah. If you're thinking about, hey, what's my value? What's my next contract look like? I mean, some of this is tied to your individual desires as well. We know it's a team game, but me factors in.
Yeah.
There's no I in team. There is a me, though. Mm-hmm. Right? And so it can work the other way as well, where you're thinking, hey, depending on your situation, this is a contract year for me. Minshew's been around. Minshew started. Minshew's getting me the ball, and now we're throwing the rook into the fire. I mean, hey, hope he hits the ground running, but he's not getting me the ball the same way the vet is. That's the interesting dynamic, too. I don't want to be doom and gloom, guys. I'm just saying there's a lot going on here. That's all.
I don't feel like, not that you need validation from me, I don't sense a tone of doom and gloom from me today. I do sense a tone of realism and of, hey, like, we don't know which way this is going to go, but the idea, while I've told Colts fans to have reasons for optimism and reasons for hope, there's a fine line between that and self-proclamations of he's going to light the world on fire right away, start week 1, win Rookie of the Year easily, and maybe get a couple MVP votes along the way, right? Like there's a fine line between super ultra idealistic and, okay, yeah, we got to be kind of realistic about what's most likely to happen right away. There's going to be struggles. There'll be growing pains. But I go back to, and I know we'll continue to discuss this as the show rolls on, if it's a mechanical issue, if it's a repetition issue, like you mentioned, I remember like going back to days of early broadcasting, like doing play-by-play. Only way to get better at it, the only way to get better at golf, at football, at life is to put yourself out there and get repetition.
Yeah.
And if that's all it is for him, I would start him week 1.
Wow. I mean, we'll get into that a little bit more, but it's just so different. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Most jobs and learning as you go, and you're an NFL quarterback with like careers tied to how you perform initially. Like it's everything that comes with that, all the pressure, all the scrutiny. It's a wild, wild thing. Hey, coming up next, I know you're a big NBA guy, Jimmy. So there were 2 things that happened during NBA games last night that show how this was the dumbest criticism in the entire NFL draft. Okay, I saw the NBA and went straight to the NFL draft. I'll lay it out for you. We'll see if you agree or not. I'm Brian Noe. He's Jimmy Cook. It's 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
7-5, The Fan.
I'm Brian, though. He's Jimmy Cook here on The Fan. Is that my nemesis, Dave Matthews, right there?
Indeed.
Is that who it was? You trying to troll me already, Eddie
Yes,
Garrison?
yes.
Is that what it is? What do you have?
I want to see you get all fired up.
You got DMB.
See if you turn blue.
You got Tool lined up there. Fish. Get all the jam bands.
He's looking out for you.
Yeah, man, Eddie rolling out the red carpet over here. Very nice. Are you a Dave Matthews Band fan there, Jimmy?
Is Toes by him? Or is that a different group?
I don't know, Eddie. Toes?
Do not
I don't
know
about Toes.
That's the country song, and I always get the Dave Matthews Band confused with the actual band that actually sings that song. But otherwise, no, I'm not a big Dave Matthews fan. I do this every time. It's not made myself look like a fool to half our audience, which isn't new. Zach Brown Band, I always do that. Zach Brown
really?
Band is
Yeah,
Toes,
yeah.
so it's my bad. No, not a Dave
Toes.
Matthews guy. No.
Yeah. Well, good.
So
Neither am I.
Great. So it was completely a troll job right there.
I love the honesty.
I love that too. Okay, so a couple of things happened in the NBA last night. By the way, we'll get to Tyrese Halliburton, who had what is now a viral reaction to Jordan Poole. The Warriors were down by 3 late against the Lakers. Jordan Poole pulls from about 28 feet. Doesn't make it. And Tyrese Halliburton was on this NBA Twitter live show and was like, I'd take that shot. What's wrong with that shot? And so everybody else on the show, Channing Frye, is like, dude, put the Hennessy down.
Tyrese got that dirty. It's tough.
Yeah.
It's tough.
So we'll get the audio to you here on the show today. But a couple of things happened in the NBA last night. Now, you had Aaron Rodgers. He was courtside again for the New York Knicks game. Taking it in. He's brand new with the New York Jets.
He's rumored the Mets have given him an offer to throw out a first pitch. I don't know if that got finalized, but yeah, he's making the rounds that any top athlete does when they arrive there.
Yeah.
Yep.
So he's sitting next to Sauce Gardner, the defensive rookie of the year. Very good cornerbacks. They're taking in the game. And so I thought, okay, Aaron Rodgers is there. Of course, he likes the attention, likes the limelight, doesn't shy away from it. Some would say he's a me guy. To at least some extent. Have to say that. And then you also had LeBron James. LeBron was in action as the Lakers beat the Warriors in Game 1. And, of course, LeBron on the road did his trademark throwing of the powder into the air. And I just stopped and I thought
Took a second try, by the way. Don't know if you saw that. I missed it live, but apparently they recapped it on Inside the NBA. Bottle's empty. First try he did, they had the cameras there. There was nothing there. They had to go find another bottle and do it. But anyway, go ahead. Sorry.
Great troll job, by the way.
Oh, yeah. Tip of the cap.
Spectacular troll. Only if they put, ketchup in the powder, something. Take it to the next level, yeah. But I thought about this, and I'm like, what's funny? It made me think. You're going to think I have a problem. You're going to think I need therapy or something like that. But
not exactly uncharted waters at this point, but let's go on.
Okay, all right. I thought of my guy, Will the Thrill Levis. Now follow me on this one.
Okay.
This was the dumbest criticism of the entire NFL draft, which was the shirtless bathroom selfie that he posted on social media. And listen, some of these media guys went off on it. Some of the media guys, Colin Cowherd, who's one of the best in the business, he was relaying information from NFL front offices. And they were saying, don't like it. Don't like the look. Me guy. Look at me. Really? Okay, let's think about this for a second here, Jay Cook. LeBron James, sort of like center stage, okay? He loves the attention, craves it, does things. He'll tweet something vague like the red stork flies east above the meadows, and you're like, is he criticizing Kevin Love right now? What's he doing exactly? He loves the attention.
Sure.
Aaron Rodgers loves the attention. You're talking about multi-time MVPs. We all know their credentials. They've been some of the best in their respective sports. Outside of team success with Aaron Rodgers, of course. But whatever. That's a footnote, apparently. I digress. But
as a Lombardi,
yeah,
he's won something.
Got
at
one.
least.
He's got one. Great. 6 more to go.
Sure.
To get there on.
Well on his way.
He's got to take the warp zone like the Super Mario Bros. Movie or something like that. Yeah, but you see where I'm going with this.
Yep.
Even if Will Levis is self-absorbed, me guy, craves the attention, even if that's true, and I doubt you can tell all of that from a bathroom selfie, even if that's the case, that doesn't automatically mean he won't pan out.
Right.
There have been plenty of selfish me guys that have panned out in sports. Would you say Kyrie Irving's career has been an absolute failure?
No.
How can you say that? He's won a championship.
Bit of rocky road, but no. I mean,
Very
just
rocky.
on the court.
Right.
Yes.
He's one of the biggest me guys we've got.
Yeah.
And if you really work it down, you would deem his career a success. Put it this way. If you could say the Pacers' next draft pick, okay, if he could have the exact same body of work as Kyrie Irving, production-wise, winning a championship, you would sign up in a heartbeat for that. And look, it has been mayhem. But the point is, even if someone is selfish, self-absorbed, me guy, that doesn't automatically take them out of the running for being an asset and actually being successful in comparison to some of the other guys who are team-first guys. Tim Tebow was all about the team. He couldn't play. It's all about can you play or not about bathroom selfies. It was the dumbest thing I've ever heard.
I agree with you. It's dumb if it impacts your full evaluation of the quarterback. Obviously, if you have two pristine prospects right next to each other, you're going to fine-tune, and maybe that is a difference maker for you. And if so, fine. One thing, just get out of the way, because you're going to like where I think I end this.
Okay, all right.
The bathroom muscle selfie is muscle guy tool move. Never been a fan of it. Like that's the way it is viewed amongst social media consumers. It's just unless you're doing like a weight loss journey or something like that, and you're like, that you see before and afters all the time, that's one thing. But just straight up mirror selfie, showing off the pecs, tool. It's just instantly what's going to pop in your head.
Yeah.
But it shouldn't impact on the field evaluations. You're probably right. I'm probably glaringly missing somebody that has been as chaotic in terms of being a me guy from the moment they were drafted, like Will Levis is in this situation. But with the three examples you just laid out, I didn't really see the full, glaring, obvious me until after they won something. With Kyrie, he really didn't go into this whole, whatever you want to call it, till after they won, and he decided he wanted to, the famous reason of why he wanted out of Cleveland, kind of wanted to get out of LeBron's shadow, wanted to go do it on his own. They were willing to make that trade. Aaron Rodgers, he had the similar thing of Will Levis, right? He's just kind of chuckling in the green room like, what's going on? I'm in a free fall. Finally gets his opportunity, wins something. Now you got discount double check. You got everything rolling along. LeBron, I mean, he was crowned the chosen one on Sports Illustrated out of the gate. I didn't really notice the full turn until Miami happened and until he won that first ring.
Well, think about that. That's a great
decision.
Think of the decision, the pep rally. Not 5, not 6. That was before any rings.
Sure.
And the powder toss. But
the winning cures it is my point.
I hear you. The point I'm making is I like the showmanship. I have no problem with it. But it irks me when you think bathroom selfies are, not you, but people think that bathroom selfies are in a different category of showmanship or bringing attention onto themselves. It's not. I don't have any problem with LeBron's powder toss. Whatever, it's just his thing. He likes the attention. He's one of the biggest team guys in the history of the league.
Right.
He's getting his teammates involved. He's not a me guy in terms of his style of play at all. But the point I'm making is don't look at bathroom selfies and make more out of it than there is to make. It'd be like we all have something. If we started this off with Dave Matthews Band. If I leave here, of course, I'm not going to drive out of here. It didn't go well at the beginning of the day here. One way's all over the circle, but when we get far enough walking distance away from the circle so I'm not going the wrong way on a one-way, and I drive out of here, if I see someone with a DMB sticker on their car, I'm going to be like, oh, gosh, these freaking people. Might be a great guy.
Yeah.
Might be a great girl. I might get along with them great.
Can't judge the book by its cover.
Cannot.
Yeah.
But I think there was a lot of judging the Levis book by the selfie cover.
There was, and it's easy. I'm willing to acknowledge that, even though, again, that wasn't the whole reason why I didn't want him here.
Yeah.
But, it's an easy attack because it's just it's always been viewed, at least through my upbringing, as, look at this guy. What's he doing? I don't know. It's just weird, right? You could flex on the beach and someone could take your photo. Totally different than the bathroom selfie. It shouldn't be viewed in another category, but for a lot of people it is. And it can be, that's fine, but it shouldn't be a reason to think, oh, he's not going to be a good NFL quarterback. Like, if that was the rationale, and for some people, it was a legitimate list off of why I don't think he's going to pan out in the NFL. I didn't do it, but people did.
Yeah.
You're insane to do it because they're not equal parts of what makes an NFL quarterback.
There are a lot of stereotypes out there, you know? If, I don't know, maybe you see a barbed wire tattoo, and you're like, yeah, that was big in the early 90s? Like, what are you doing? Get rid of that thing. Or I love metal. I love heavy metal music. There are some people that if I'm blasting heavy metal, and there's a good chance I am going down the road, they'll look and be like, this freaking guy. Right? Like, you're just starting to fill in the spaces. And I think that was some of the things that people did. Look, if your evaluation was lower on Levis, fine. You know, there were critical things to point at, negative things to point at. But to couple in the bathroom selfie with that of like a, see, and this is why. It's like, bro, really think about that. Let's just say Levis works out and he's a good NFL quarterback. How dumb will the people look that were saying, oh, bathroom selfies, I'm out? Are you serious right now?
If I was him, and again, you've made the jokes about, oh, let's live in a fantasy world. I'm going to live in a fantasy world here for a second, where Will Levis leads the Titans to a Super Bowl win.
Okay.
First picture.
First year?
Whatever.
Okay.
Whatever. Because that would matter to me. That would matter if I was him and that I saw that plastered all the time. First two things I'm doing, whatever. The mayo and the coffee, that's fine. Mix it in there. But I'm taking the Lombardi Trophy and I'm doing a bathroom selfie with the Lombardi Trophy.
That's a great move.
First thing. It's the first thing I'm doing.
That is a great move. That's interesting, too, how we always talk about a chip on the shoulder. Sometimes it works out. Sometimes it gets in your way. And some guys, I don't know, it gets in their way. I know the name, people get off and running, but I think of Colin Kaepernick when he was on the field. He would act like he was kissing his tattoos because a lot of people gave him flack for that. They're like, you don't look like a typical quarterback. And he's like, I'm not going to be like everybody else. Like, I'm going to be me. And so he would act like he was kissing his tattoos. Remember that game he went crazy against the Packers in the playoffs? He would go down and act like he was kissing his tattoos. I think Kaepernick went before all the anthem and the response and all that stuff. I think the chip on his shoulder, I think sometimes got in his way. I think Baker Mayfield, maybe a better example. The chip on his shoulder, I think there are times where it's gotten in his way more than it's been an asset.
Sure.
So I'm curious with Will Levis. He's got to have a chip on his shoulder for just rotting in the green room. But can he utilize it the right way? Not everybody does.
Yeah, sometimes it breaks you. Sometimes it molds you into a better quarterback because of it.
Yeah.
And look, I don't draw parallels other than, oh, that's unique. That happened to this guy. That happened to that guy. But would have been very easy for Aaron Rodgers to have had the same thing happen. I don't see that for Will Levis's career, but there's a number of different paths you can go down on this conversation of did it make you or did it break you based on the adversity you felt on that draft night.
Yeah, no doubt. Hey, coming up next, can you imagine if the Pacers were in the same position as this idiotic team? I just want to throw something out at you right around the corner. I'm Brian Noe. He is Jimmy Cook. It's 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan. I'm Brian Noe. He's Jimmy Cook here on The Fan today. You know, I thought about the Pacers randomly last night because my brain is a weird place sometimes, you know? I'll make some connections where you're like, I could see how you made that connection. And I'll make connections where you're like, what? How? So, Jared Vanderbilt, okay? He plays for the Lakers now. He was involved with that Rudy Gobert trade to the Minnesota Timberwolves, okay? Now, the way I think of this, Jay Cook, is imagine if the Pacers made a move that did not work out to the same tune as Rudy Gobert going to the T-Wolves. Think about what Minnesota has given up to get him. The Jazz got in that trade, they got Malik Beasley. He was playing last night as well, right? Mm-hmm. For the Lakers. You had Patrick Beverley. You had, I've never heard of this guy, have you? Leandro Bolmaro.
Eddie? Yeah, no.
Got nothing for him. Walker Kessler, though, good rookie season for the Utah Jazz. Very good. Jared Vanderbilt, again, decent role player. He was on the floor last night against the Warriors. Those are the players involved in the deal. Now the picks, Jimmy. 2023 first rounder, 25 first rounder, 26 pick swap, 27 first rounder, 2029 first rounder. We've got 4 first round picks, 1 pick swap, and 5 players. 1, a rookie who was really good in Walker Kessler, and 2 guys who were role players for the Lakers last night in Malik Beasley and Jared Vanderbilt. Like really, wrap your mind around that. The Pacers making this move of, let's get Rudy Gobert, and you know what? Let's throw 4 first rounders and a pick swap. Let's just light that on fire, and this is going to take us to the promised land. And they got almost swept out of the first round. It was a gentleman's sweep against Denver. That is a sad reality for the T-Wolves.
It will go down probably in terms of my lifespan, which is 28 years, as one of the most just baffling trades maybe in the history of the league.
Wow.
And it's a shame because Minnesota, much like Sacramento, a very, very hungry fan base, and it feels like they are on the precipice, or at least they have been the last couple of years of, and there's no doubt they are, right? They showed it this year, their best basketball since KG. And you see the leap that Ant-Man made and Anthony Edwards, and you wish that, I don't know, I wouldn't have done the deal. Gobert's like, I'm going to have my best season ever next year. What does that really look like in terms of the Timberwolves prospects out west? Just a mind-boggling move across the board.
To me, listen, man, I bring a lot of stuff back to Texas Hold'em. It's the best expression in that game, and it really translates to sports. Well-timed aggression. For Texas Hold'em, you're sitting at the poker table, you got to have well-timed aggression. You can't be passive all the time. You're never going to get anywhere. You can't be aggressive all the time. You're not going to get anywhere that way either. It's got to be well-timed. And this was such a poorly timed, all-in move of like, I get it. Hey, we've got Anthony Edwards. We've got Karl Anthony Towns. We've got young, good playmakers. Let's take the next step. Let's do it. And man, first round exit. And look at what your future is. What's your future? What are you looking forward to? You had Anthony Edwards. Well, think about it. You had the guy, who was it that punched a wall and broke his hand? You had Anthony Edwards. He was cited with a misdemeanor. He threw a folding chair after Game 5. He's upset. He missed the game-tying three-point attempt. It hit a couple of female staff members. And now he's facing misdemeanor charges. Like, this is the reality for the Timberwolves. I thank the basketball gods that is not what's happening with the Pacers.
Yeah, it's hard to find an equivalent, right? Like, I'm just trying to think of, because Gobert is a good player, right? Like, he still has good basketball in front of him. Is he worth the treasure trove? No, it was widely panned across the board, even when the trade happened. Like, it's not like one of those where we're sitting here Monday morning quarterbacking now and being like, man, I really thought that was going to work. There's not a ton of people league-wide that looked at that move and thought what you gave up was worth going to get Rudy Gobert. And I don't, like, I'm sure I could find it if I look at, like, trade destinations for centers, and it's funny. One of the websites has possible destinations for Rudy Gobert this offseason, so that turned real quick. But I don't know what it would be in terms of the capital that was given up, and to be so confident this is the missing piece and it ends so badly.
I would love to know two things, Jimmy. I would love to know the moves, regardless of the sport, that were widely celebrated that did not work. You know what I mean? Kyrie Irving going to Dallas. That was celebrated initially.
Yep.
Like, okay, they're fourth in the West. They got Kyrie. Let's see him paired up with Luka. Did not work. Did not work.
The Steve Nash, Kobe, and Dwight move out in LA.
Great one. Great example.
Yep.
Yeah. Will that be with Will Anderson Jr. going to the Houston Texans?
Right.
It could be
Yeah.
for the price tag. And I can't tell you how many write-ups, the Houston Texans won the draft for me. They get 2 top 5 players at 2 key spots in C.J. Stroud and Will Anderson Jr., yada, yada. I mean, I don't see it. You got to surround C.J. Stroud with a lot of talent, and that's not the way to do it. I hate the move. But the point is, and the counter is, how many moves did we hate initially, and they turned out to be great? Like, that's a great little exercise also.
I have to think about it now. But, yeah, I mean, and it's we joke about it like, how big an impact will this transaction have or this draft move have? But, like, the reason that you even take a peek at what 2024's mock looks like is because, taking it back to the Colts for a second, I know we've been focused on NBA, but there are ripple effects for every franchise with these moves that you make. There's going to be a ripple effect for the next 5 years, likely at minimum, of them taking Anthony Richardson and making the decision that they did and how they built around him. And in terms of just how slim the margins are across sport, because you would assume that everyone within the Timberwolves organization was like, yes, we got our guy. We got Gobert. The team is complete. We're going to contend now over a yearly basis in the Western Conference. And I know it's only a 1-season sample size, but Sacramento looks better than you do.
Yeah.
I know you can make a case for both the Warriors and the Lakers in terms of, yes, they're aging to some extent. Right now, they look better than you do. The Grizzlies, even despite their collapse, most certainly look like they're in a better position than Minnesota does. And it all might end up going back to that trade. In terms of wasting an opportunity with Anthony Edwards there in Minnesota.
I'll give you an example that just popped in my head. A move that I did not like at all, and it worked out. I'll take the L on this one, was the Raptors getting Kawhi. Because that's the thing is, I'm not against go-for-it moves, but my whole thing is, when are you doing it? And how are you doing it? Right? Like, I'm not just going to sign up for any aggressive move and say, hey, solid. It might not be at all. And I thought renting Kawhi for 1 season, and that's all it was going to be, and you gave up a decent amount to get him, when the Warriors have KD added to a 73-win team. Yeah. I'm like, what are you guys doing? And I don't know what happened, but the planets aligned. And Clay goes down with the torn ACL in Game 6, and KD goes down with the blown out Achilles in Game 5. It just magically worked out. The shot against the Sixers that bounced 4 times on the rim and went down in Game 7 for Kawhi, it was unbelievable. But I'll take a major L on that one because I hated that move. Ultra aggressive, and it worked, but I was thumbs down on that.
That's a good one. Like, I didn't hate the move, but I was surprised by it. It was very out of character for Toronto. It's like, are you really, as a franchise, willing to take a 1-year lease on this guy and hope that it ends in an NBA championship? And yeah, I definitely looked out west and said, you're not getting through that monstrosity. Now, granted, it took a lot of help along the way with the examples you just cited. That's not even getting to the injuries that Golden State dealt with. But championship's a championship.
It is.
Worked out for you.
It did. And I still don't know how. I know, but I still can't believe that's how it actually went down. That's crazy. And I don't know, just interesting stuff right there. We got a lot to get to here, Jimmy. We're going to talk some NBA playoffs with Dave Defour. He's over there at The Athletic. Does a great job. So this sportsbusinessclassroom.com deal that he's doing at the Summer League. So what have you done in the past?
So a lot of my stuff is still broadcasting, either with some NBA TV's affiliates or some ESPN stuff in that regard, but also most of my ties are those that created the NBA Summer League in conjunction with Hall Pass Media, Albert Hall and Warren Legary, and they also started this spinoff of the Sports Business Classroom, which is basically an opportunity for those that want to pursue a career, maybe not just in the NBA, it's focused on basketball, but in professional sports, and having this immersive experience on what goes into works with a front office, how much do analytics come into play, how do you evaluate against the salary cap, and this year it's a 6-day experience out in July. Dave's a part of it, and it's a really great event for those that even if you just want to, you're already going to be immersed in NBA because it's a massive convention for all NBA people. It's a who's who of who's going to be there across the board for Summer League, but then you add in the Sports Business Classroom, and it's an opportunity to, if that's ever been something you want to do, really get a feel for how front office life works.
We can pick Dave's brain over here. Analytically, how great a decision was it for Jordan Poole to pull from 28
Yep.
down by 3? I'm curious what he'll say about that. So we'll have Dave Defour right around the corner from The Athletic. I'm Brian Noe. He's Jimmy Cook. It's 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
.75 The Fan.
I'm Brian Noe. He's Jimmy Cook. Sorry, I forgot to turn my mic on over there, Eddie. My bad on that one.
It's all good.
We're off and running here.
Rookie amateur hour over here.
Sorry. It seems like such a jerk move. Like, normally I don't bother with such things, Gosh. Such a jerk over it. Let's get Dave Defour in here, host and producer at The Athletic. Covers the NBA. We'll talk NBA playoffs. I'm just curious, though, Dave. With Eddie Garrison, he was just playing Renegade, sort of like the Steelers anthem, if you will, the Pittsburgh Steelers. Are you an NFL guy at all, as well as a big NBA guy?
Yeah, I used to be a big NFL guy, but I just don't have the TV bandwidth for other sports right now. So, I catch games here and there. I'll catch them in a bar or something like that. And I'll follow a little bit, but, man, I don't know how people have time in the day to follow sports the way that they do. I'm impressed with, fans. How do you pay attention to 4 leagues, professional wrestling, and pretend to care about the Olympics.
So who was your squad that you're just casually watching now?
Well, you know what, man? I have removed myself from the burden of fandom completely. I don't know when it happened, but it did. But I grew up a 49ers fan, and I'm from Richmond, Virginia, so I wasn't going to root for the Washington team. And they had Joe Montana and Jerry Rice. So, like, I kind of had a great childhood of sports. You know, I had those guys. I got to root for the Chicago Bulls. I became a Yankees fan. You know, it was like, I don't know, it was basically like LeBron James, picking and choosing the best teams.
Absolutely, man. NBA-wise, what did you think? Just give us an analytical breakdown of Jordan Poole of the Warriors. He pulled from 28 feet away. The Warriors were down by 3. Analytically, what would you say about that shot selection?
Honestly, the shot itself was totally fine. It was completely fine. I know everyone's caught up on the 28-footer thing. They needed a 3. It was early enough that maybe they could get an offensive rebound. They were top-blocking Clay. Clay was not going to get open. Obviously, we saw that they sent the double team to Steph. And so you're at a point where you've got to make a decision. Jared Vanderbilt had been excellent all night, was coming down hard on Jordan Poole. I'm not sure. I watched it back a couple of times because, my initial thought was, wow, he probably could have gotten a little rhythm dribble there to his left and got a better shot. Not necessarily a closer shot. The 28-foot part doesn't bother me. These guys shoot about the same percentage right at the line as they do from about 28, 29 feet. It doesn't really start to drop until you get beyond like that 32-foot mark or so. And I know not to get too in the weeds here, but the shot itself didn't bother me. It was the previous shot. It was the previous possession where he just completely lost his brain. This guy is both a wonderful talent that does amazing things with his body, but also one of the least combobulated human bodies on the planet. This guy's arms and legs seem to sometimes act with a mind of their own. He has no idea what he's doing half the time. And the crazy part about it is he's a bit of a chaos agent as a basketball player, because the chaotic good is sometimes so good that the chaotic bad you kind of have to tolerate, because the highs are very, very high. But, man, those lows are really low.
Dave Defour with us of The Athletic. Dave, I know we're going to take trips around all the series that are going on right now, but sticking with Golden State and LA for a second, the major talking point going into the series, Anthony Davis is going to have to be that dominant for them to have a real chance to win this thing. From a Warriors perspective, are there adjustments that can be made to slow him down with what they have on the roster?
I don't think anyone's made overnight growth pills, so that one adjustment is out the window, right? They can't make themselves taller. I think that they could play a little bigger, and I think that on the offensive end, that's really where the problem is for them. No scoring at the basket. If you go back and look at that Kings series, they ate them up inside. I mean, that Game 7, Steph Curry, I believe, had 18 points in the paint. My big takeaway from last night, one of the big things that stand out to me, Steph Curry going in for one of those scoop layups, and Anthony Davis sent that thing back. So, Anthony Davis is a problem for them around the basket. So I think that they've actually got to go small earlier, draw him out into the actions. They got to get him away from the basket. If he can just sit in there and roam and sort of play center field, he's going to be basically swatting anything inside. And it didn't help him that Wiggins and Gary Payton, they smoked a couple easy ones. So, they didn't even get the easy ones where he wasn't around the basket. So they have to dominate the minutes that he's not on the court, especially inside. But they got to find a way to get him pulled out away from the basket defensively. That was the game yesterday. They couldn't score at the rim, and the Lakers owned the paint. So, if they can figure out a way to get past that, I'd be really impressed. But as it stands, man, I think that they're going to have to go smaller rather than play Looney and Draymond together.
This is going to sound, Dave, like a total knee-jerk question and prisoner of the moment question, so it might be a double whammy, but I'm going to ask it anyway. With the Lakers, with what you just explained, how the Warriors are undersized and AD can take advantage of that, in another way, styles make fights. Do you think that the Warriors are actually a better matchup for the Lakers than the Kings would have been?
No, I think that the Kings probably don't stand a chance against the Lakers. I still think the Warriors can win the series. I mean, losing Game 1 is not a big deal to this team. I believe that they've lost their last 3 Game 1s consecutively. And, we know that they just beat the Kings, but they also lost Game 1 of the finals last year. So I don't worry about this team at all. I still expect them to make the finals and win this series. I just can't go against Steph Curry. You know, he's the ultimate winner. And so I think that one of the big adjustments, like I said, going small. But on the defensive end, they did start doing this late during their comeback, and I think that this will be the blueprint for Game 2. They started picking Anthony Davis up higher and holding him out of the paint because he was beating them down court. He was getting deep seals. He was just getting interior position, and that was hurting him. The other thing is, you know, the Lakers actually shot the ball pretty well, and they aren't really that good of a shooting team. They didn't get the three-point volume that they're going to need to hang with the Warriors, and I think that ultimately the Lakers run into a math problem against this Warriors team.
Dave, when we go out east, surprised at all that Joel Embiid plans to play tonight, barring a setback? At least that's the reports.
No, not at all. Guy's a warrior, man, and this is a huge opportunity. If they can take this Game 2, well, then all of a sudden they're in the driver's seat going home, trying to get to the conference finals. So I think if he's ready to play, him playing, man, that's just not a surprise. He's played hurt a lot more than people realize. You know, we all know that he misses time, and you know it's been held against him. But this season in particular, I think this guy has just played through a lot of injuries that other guys probably would have sat for. I mean, it meant a lot to him to try to be out on the court. So for him to actually play in Game 2 doesn't shock me at all. Not at all. I'm glad to see them going for it rather than pulling the smart guy move of, well, we won Game 1, let's just wait till Game 3. This shows an impetus to try to win, which is, you know, that's what sports is all about, right? Like you play to win the game and you always put your best foot forward. And this is clearly that. So I think it's huge. If they could come away with a win and go home up 2-0, I don't see how they don't win the series.
He's Dave Defour, host and producer at The Athletic, joining us here on The Fan. You know, Dave, you think about all the injury issues in the NBA playoffs. It's been crazy, the amount of attrition. If you look at the team as of right now, subject to change, like May 3rd, today, who knows what's going to happen tonight and throughout the week, but who would you say is the team that's best positioned to compete for a title, just injury-wise, and the team that's in the toughest spot injury-wise as well?
Well, it's got to be the Denver Nuggets. They're up 2-0 on Kevin Durant and the Suns. Everyone on their team appears to be healthy. I think Jokic has a little wrist thing, but he's playing through that. And, you know, just had a 40-point triple-double. So clearly he's unbothered. I think it's got to be them. They were the best team in the West all year. Nobody wants to believe in them, in spite of them being the best team in the West all year. The amount of chemistry that's on display every single night for them. These guys know how to play together. And you can see that, especially the stark contrast between them and the Phoenix Suns, who, when things start to get a little rough, they tend to get a little rough on the court. So I think it's got to be the Nuggets. And as far as the other way, I think it's the Miami Heat. Man, this Jimmy Butler injury, they were riding high when he got hurt. They took that first game against the Knicks. They should have won Game 2, you could argue. I think if Jimmy was out there, they likely do. If he can't go in Game 3, they may be down 2-1 before he can get back, because the Knicks kind of figured some stuff out, especially with Julius Randle out there playing a little bit of bully ball. So I think it's got to be the Heat. Jimmy Butler has been the best player in the playoffs this year, and the Heat look like they were on at least a conference finals path. If he can't go, or if he's diminished, I just don't know if they've got enough firepower to beat the Knicks. So I think it's the Miami Heat, and we got to watch that Jimmy Butler situation closely.
Dave, do you think that the Heat did the exact opposite of what you were happy the Sixers are going to do tonight, which is they had that mentality of, hey, we got a game, we're fine, and they just wanted to punt to going back to South Beach?
I don't think that's it. I mean, have you ever sprained an ankle? It's a high ankle sprain. I mean, this is a bad injury. A knee sprain, I'm not going to say it's not as bad of an injury, but you can sometimes play through it, whereas an ankle, no. And I'm a bit of what I refer to as an ankle truther here. I think that NBA players come back so early from ankle injuries that people have an unrealistic expectation for the timeline of healing of an ankle injury. This is a 6 to 8, maybe even 8 to 12 week recovery period for this ankle. Like, this thing is not going to be right until sometime this summer for Jimmy Butler. That's a bad ankle sprain. This is the fact that we're talking about him potentially coming back 2 days later just shows you what the medical staffs are like, what these athletes kind of go through. But for him to miss the game, knowing that Jimmy Butler is one of the toughest competitors in the NBA, does not miss playoff games for anything. That should tell us all about the severity of this. So, no, I'm not going to hit them for punting because I don't think that was punting. I think Jimmy couldn't go. And I think that if he can go in Game 3, because it's going to be, it's injury mitigation. You don't want to make it worse. With an ankle, that's an issue because it is it's a round joint. You're going all over the place with that thing, and you need that stability. So you have to worry about re-injury. And then it gets to pain tolerance. If they can get to the point where the only thing they worry about is pain tolerance, Jimmy Butler will play.
Dave, you strike me as a guy who's sprained an ankle badly a time or two in his lifetime. Yeah? I want to know, Dave, have you done it? Is that what you said?
One time, yeah.
One time.
I ruptured 4 ligaments.
Ooh.
And my leg was black from my knee down.
Oh, so that's what I want to know. Without saying it, Dave, what was your word or phrase of choice to yell out in agony?
I yelled SOB as loud as I could.
What is it? I think it's a numbing mechanism, right? Like you got to yell something out in pain and anger. It's kind of like if you have a finger injury and you kind of shake it out. I don't think it really helps, but somehow it feels better, right?
Actually, the shaking out does help.
It does.
Sort of like if you rub the pain, like if you get punched and you rub it, it's actually like there's pain radiation, so you can actually spread that pain a little bit to the other nerves, so it's not as acute. I was married to a dentist, so I know a lot about nerves. And but with an ankle or something like that, I think that the act of yelling, and I'm just guessing here, it probably releases some adrenaline, which helps you fight through the pain. If you think about like our ancestors, guess what? You don't have time to lay on the ground if you got injured and there are wolves around. So, you can yell, and that gives you the adrenaline to fight through the pain, and then it hurts again later. I'm guessing there that is the sort of evolutionary impetus for the yelling out in pain.
Hey, man, I think yelling helps at times. It depends when you do it. Like the vehicle backing up in the background. If you just stop backing up right now, I think it would be kind of like liberating.
I'm outside of there's a construction zone across the street. I can't escape it. I'm in the gym. I'm going to do some yelling here in the gym.
There you go.
In 20 minutes, yeah.
Love that, Dave. Well, hey, man, thanks for the time today. Enjoy the rest of the playoffs, and we'll catch you soon.
Thanks, Dave.
Yeah, absolutely. You guys take care.
All right, you too. There he is, Dave Defour, host and producer at The Athletic. What's your worst injury ever, Jimmy?
As a young, a 5 or 6 year old, taking a jump from one stair and being like, oh, that was fun. Take a jump from a higher stair, higher stair, and a higher stair, and then not like a severe ankle sprain, but bruised it up enough where it was like, that probably wasn't too smart.
That was one step too many right there.
It's carpeted stairs. That makes it any better.
How old were you in this?
Probably 6.
6.
Yeah.
Were you cussing by then?
No, not quite. Not yet.
Actually, funny you should say that. That was my very first cuss word, Brian. No.
I remember it like it was yesterday.
Yeah. Brian Noe and Jimmy Cook with you here, 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan. There are a couple of things to digest there with what Dave was talking about. One thing that comes to my mind is I wish we were better as fans and the media when it comes to players playing while hurt. There are a lot of times that we just don't take it into account the way that we should. Where if a guy's like 70%, and Jimmy Butler, when he got back in the game in Game 1, and he's really just a decoy. He's barely making it up and down the court. Like, no one said, well, Jimmy, where are the points? But every now and then people get very unreasonable with their expectations. Jalen Brunson yesterday, he was asked about, I think he's nursing an ankle injury. Or a knee, I can't remember what it was, but he was asked after the game, like, how much of an issue was it for you in Game 2? He had this long pause, and he was like, it was a little bit, that type of thing. It's like, you can't come out and say, it's bothering me. Well, you should be able to, but we immediately are like, excuse, just get it done. I don't care how. It's like, bro, my leg is hanging by a thread. You have to take that into account.
Yeah, and so often it's not just fans. It is. It's the national pundits. Like, it automatically gets viewed as, all right, we're building those excuses in now already, and that's not what Michael Jordan would have done, or it turns into that whole pathway of things. And to Dave's larger point there, everybody wants to become a Twitter doctor or a social media doctor and be like, oh, I had a similar injury, and he should be able to be back out there in a quarter. You know, like, okay, well, you don't know the full diagnosis of what's going on. Could be different than that one time you fell off your bike and had a similar injury. You know?
Right. And an NBA playoff game might be a little more intense than getting back on the Schwinn or Huffy or whatever it was. Right? Like, it matters. Did you have a Huffy, Eddie, growing up?
No. I was just thinking of the Schwinn bike.
I would like to see a new stat in the NBA. You tell me if you like this idea or not. Okay? I would love to see, with Anthony Davis in particular, there are a lot of times that he disrupts a shot. He doesn't block it. It doesn't show up in the box score. But I would love for him to get credit for a disrupted shot. When the shot is completely altered. Yeah. You know what I mean? I think that would be the way to gauge it, because this probably won't become a thing in the NBA. Because think about it, how it differs from quarterback pressures in football. Like, there's a stat for that. You didn't get a sack. You might not have even hit the quarterback, but you got credit for a pressure. Yeah. It's a big thing. With the NBA, you're guarding the guy in front of you. You're typically like a foot away.
Yeah.
Right? Almost at all times.
Yes.
And so if you get a hand in the face, it might be tricky to figure out, was that a disrupted shot? Was it not? I think if the shot is altered, like you start to jump up and you realize this shot is getting blocked by Anthony Davis unless you completely can change the arc of the shot. Yeah. I think you should get credit for doing something like that.
Yeah, because it impacts the play in such a way that fans and even, clearly the statisticians in general, it doesn't get the love that it deserves, but it's just as valuable of a block if it's a missed shot. If you're forcing someone to have to change course or change direction, whether it's just a drive or whether it's a jump shot and having to pass out of it, if that leads to a shot clock violation, leads to a turnover, leads to a missed shot, that's made possible because of Anthony Davis, because of Joel Embiid, because of whoever. Yeah, I'm right there with you.
And a lot of those QB pressures, it results in something negative for the offense. Mm-hmm. It's either a hurried throw, leads to a pick, leads to an incompletion. Like getting pressure on the quarterback is really, really important. And I feel like if they can do that in football, isn't that close to the equivalent in basketball? It's as close as you can get with a disrupted shot where the guy has to change his arc or just make an adjustment. I think you should get credit for doing something like that. I like that. It's a kumbaya moment over here.
I'm proud of us.
I also think, look, the Warriors, and Dave said it, there are a lot of people who believe this. I think the Warriors are total fool's gold. I'll say it again. I absolutely do. I think that the Warriors are a lot like Tampa Bay, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, where the Steph Curry and Tom Brady thing, there's something there. There's a tie-in right there where you think, and they did it this past season, where Tampa, they get to the playoffs, had this horrible season, 8-9. Well, I can't pick the Cowboys to win. I mean, it's Tom Brady, right? Mm-hmm. And they went out there and they lost. They reminded us all season long, we're not that good, right? Yeah. We're 8-9 at the end of the day. We can't protect. We can't run the ball. There were holes. With the Warriors, I mean, we all know their credentials. 4-time champs. We get all that. We know their strengths, but they have weaknesses. They have a hard time rebounding on the road. They have a hard time defending on the road. They have a hard time winning on the road. They just dropped game 1 at home. Mm-hmm. Not games 1 and 2 on the road. I mean, that's a big deal. I just don't buy the Warriors collectively, even though we just saw Steph Curry drop 50. Like, he's sensational. I'm just not buying them as a squad.
I'm not saying that I'm fully bought into them, but there's times where I don't buy the Lakers fully.
Yeah, hey, that's fine.
A lot of it is, and I don't know if it's age, if it's complications from the foot injury that he dealt with earlier in the year. I don't know what it is. LeBron feels more passive or more willing to be in the sidecar than in years past. And look, I hate that verbiage because, you know, people said that about him in the first year in Miami, and he was. Like, there were times where he was passive within the fourth quarter late in games. That's not what I'm saying. I just think he's at a point where he's picking and choosing his spots. Again, whether that is the foot injury, whether that's his age, I don't know. There's also times where he's got a nice backdoor cut, flies through the air, throws it down. It's like, he's probably fine. This isn't about LeBron, though. Large picture. The large picture is they are only going to go as far as Anthony Davis is able to take over games. I'm not saying he has to join Wilt and Shaq like he did last night and have like a 30-20 evening in a playoff game, but he's got to get 25 to 30 a night for them to have a real shot, not just in this series, but if they want to win it all. And also, at one point in time, and I need to look at what they finished, but at halftime, they were shooting like 1 for 8, I think, from beyond the arc. And they ended up knocking in a couple threes. Austin Reeves had one in the second half, but if that's the battle you're going to run with the Warriors, which they're going to get open looks and you're going to dare shooters to beat you or anybody but Steph beat you, that's a very dangerous game if you're trading 2s with 3s all night and Anthony Davis has a handful of games where he doesn't have that alpha dog in him. I hate to go all Shaq on you, but that's been a large criticism of him of the last couple of Lakers regular seasons and postseasons is he needs to remind people why he's one of the best players in the world. And that's the only way they get out of it.
Hey, I hear you. And that's something he wasn't consistent against the Grizzlies. Mm-hmm. His odd games early on, like games 1, 3, 5 were good. The even ones, 2, 4, not so good. So you got to see a consistent Anthony Davis. It might take that to eventually beat the Warriors. And I hear you with LeBron. His game 5 against Memphis was dreadful. Yep. He was awful. And that was a short turnaround. There was just one day off in between those two games. And so, yeah, you get glimpses. I lost a bet. Jimmy. I hate to even break this to you, but I have a stake bet. There's a former NFL player, George Reister. So we do a show together. And I had a stake bet on the Grizzlies winning Game 4 outright. Because they were down 2-1 in the series. Just one day off in between. I'm like, I like the Grizzlies. That was the game LeBron hit that real high layup to tie it up, send it to overtime. I was that close. So we bet stakes. He gets these stakes in L.A. that are like $70. And so I ran my mouth off. I don't believe in the Warriors. I say they will not get to the Western Conference Finals. We locked this bet in before the playoffs began. I was like, I'll give you 2 stakes to my 1 stake. I'm that confident the Warriors don't make it to the Western Conference Finals. So I'm down 140 if the Warriors sneak past the Lakers.
Well, I hope you're right, Ben, in that regard.
I do too.
For your wallet.
And the beautiful thing is he's a diehard Laker fan. So he accidentally is betting against his favorite team by backing the Warriors right there.
It's emotional hedging right there.
Yeah.
He's comfortable getting you a stake if it means LA getting through.
Which nickname do you like better? This is unfair, somewhat accurate, but mean-spirited. I didn't come up with these, okay? There's a guy I work with, producer, Patty Suika. His dad calls Anthony Davis Anthony Day to Davis. That's pretty solid.
It's good.
Another former NFL player, Ephraim Salam, diehard Lakers fan, does radio. He calls Anthony Davis Bambi Legs. Another solid nickname.
It's Day to Davis for me.
Day to Davis.
That's too good.
It's really good.
Yep.
It's unfortunate
it's got the pattern
that's
down.
the case.
It's yeah.
Yeah.
That's my winner.
It would never happen. I can hear in my head Kevin Harlan saying that.
Yes.
Easier than Bambi Legs. You know, I can't hear that in my head. All right. We got a lot to do. Can the Colts, Jimmy, be honest with themselves? We'll lay that out for you. I'm Brian Noe. He's Jimmy Cook. It's 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
The Fan.
I'm Brian Noe. He's Jimmy Cook here on The Fan. Here's the thing, Jimmy. I'm going to have to digress just a little bit, and we'll get to the Colts here. So, Jimmy, Eddie is playing Girls, Girls, Girls from Motley Crue. One of the lines from that song.
No, that's Poison.
Poison, that's right.
Nothing but a good time.
Nothing but I messed up my. How dare I? I got all giddy about a story, and it wasn't even the right song. Don't you hate when that happens?
I do. Thankfully for you, I'm not the music snob of the group, so I'm like,
whatever. You're kind of in the ballpark. Yeah.
Good
You're
effort.
right.
You had a good at bat. Fall off a couple pitches.
It did sound like Girls, 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 but Eddie is right. There was some Poison. Two stories, actually. So this is not a very good story at all. Let me warn you here. But there was one time in L.A., so I played guitar for a good portion of my life, and so I was in L.A. It's right after college. I moved out there. I was giving music a go. Like, I'm playing guitar, whatever. And so I can't even tell you the scenario. It was like dudes I was jamming with were getting a band off the ground, whatever. Someone has this rehearsal space, and Bret Michaels shows up in his Mercedes. And they're like, oh, yeah, Poison has their rehearsal studio like across the... I'm like, really? Yeah, so my one experience with Bret Michaels.
There you go.
And as far as what I thought was the song, which was Girls, Girls, Girls from Motley Crue, one of the lyrics is Raising Hell at the Seventh Veil. Something like that. It's a strip club in L.A.
Okay.
And I would see it all the time on Sunset. I don't know if it's still there or not. I never went in. Never went into the Seventh Veil.
Didn't get the full scope of that story.
Just didn't think about,
Now, did you watch the Motley Crue documentary on Netflix?
I don't think I saw the whole thing. No, Eddie. I don't know if I saw any of it.
You have to watch it.
But tremendous.
It's interesting.
Nikki Sixx did a show for Premiere, which is right across the hall from Fox Sports Radio. So if you were in studio, you would see Nikki Sixx run into the studio to do a show over there. But yeah, there you go. Okay, let's get to the Colts here, Jimmy. Can they be honest with themselves? That is the question. So we said this before the draft, and there's no way to know how they had Anthony Richardson, Will the Thrill Levis, how they had them evaluated. But can they be honest if they don't believe either of those guys is the guy? Based on having a bunch of veteran retreads that didn't work out, could they be honest saying this isn't the time to choose the quarterback? We'll never know for sure. Now the question becomes, if you don't see Anthony Richardson ready to at least get on the field in the NFL, the way I look at it, Jimmy, is he ready enough to not be at high risk to start with bad habits, right? I'm not expecting him to be Joe Montana, the finished version, and all. I'm not expecting that. He's a rookie. But does he know enough? Does he have the playbook down enough? Can he avoid starting to make bad habits that he's going to have to break? Can the Colts be honest with themselves if they don't see that he's ready yet to say it's not the right time to just throw him out there into the fire? I don't know that they can. I mean, the technical answer would be they can, but will they? I don't know. They're already talking about the best way to learn is just learn on the job. Get out there. That's mostly true, but when you start making or forming these bad habits, that sometimes you're doing more harm than good.
Two things could possibly be true. The idea of the only way to fix inexperience is to finally go out and get experience. Like, that can be true, but it could also be, well, he doesn't know the playbook or doesn't know the offense, or he's struggling in a handful of areas where we're not confident throwing him out there. And we talked earlier about who has the biggest leash, who is more stressed out about this process. Is it Steichen? Is it Ballard? And to bring that full circle of, can they be honest with themselves? This is a critical juncture for Shane Steichen, because this is his first opportunity as a head coach in this league, and it's his blueprint to run. He needs, if he wants to be one of the great coaches in the history of the NFL, I know that's a big ask, but if that's what he wants to do, I would assume everybody in any profession wants to be the very best. You have to be able to be honest with yourself on this particular prospect. And just because you say, he needs a year, or he needs 6 games, or he needs whatever, doesn't mean you don't think he can work in the NFL. It is, you've had a real hard look in the mirror and have been honest with yourself to your point. So why I think they can is because Shane Steichen has no other alternative. He has to be fully honest with himself on this because he's going to have some type of cushion with Irsay. Most head coaches do. And this might be your one bite at the apple as an NFL head coach.
Right.
You need to be cautious in some regard.
We've got all this Indy 500 stuff in the studio right here. It's great. Nice decorating. I like the checkered flag. We got wheels around here. I'm not great on describing this, but it's a festive atmosphere right here. But I think of it with a sports car, okay? If you have just gotten a sports car that you've been wanting for a long, long time, you saved your money like crazy, you finally got this car, you waxed it, everything's set to go, but you know what? It's not the right season for it here in Indianapolis. You know, we're not quite out of winter at the time that you've gotten this new sports car. It's the hardest thing to stay disciplined and say, we got to wait. It's going to take a few months, but we got to wait. That's the move to make. I don't know if the same scenario is going to present itself. I mean, maybe the weather will be nice with Anthony Richardson. He shows enough that he digested the playbook. You could get him out there. But if he isn't at that level yet, and he's at risk to start creating some bad habits, I think you're better off waiting. Does that mean wait till year 4 like Jordan Love? No, of course not. But giving it a little bit more time is not the worst thing to do. If this is all based on an if, where he is in his progression as he gets everything down.
And that goes to the part about being honest with yourself, because it would be dishonest if you're Shane Steichen. Again, I don't know why you would do this, because in terms of the ability to build out your perfect franchise, he's in the driver's seat on that right now, right? Like, I'm not saying that he has more or less say than Ballard, but he is in command of what he wants to build here. Jim Irsay at least has given him that blessing to the point that they wound up taking Anthony Richardson. To be dishonest with yourself would be to see all those glaring red flags of he's not picking this up, he's not ready for the speed, he needs to know what the ins and outs of day-to-day life in the NFL are, study within the quarterback room, see Minshew for a bit. If all of those are there, like those legitimate hurdles, and again, they might not be, but if they are, the dishonest thing would be, well, maybe it'll be fine. This is our shiny new car. Let's go out.
Right.
Iced last night? Don't worry about it. We'll be fine. So we spin out. What's the big deal? That would be the dishonest thing. The harder part about it, and why you mentioned it's so difficult, is being able to see all of those factors if they are at play and making the tough say of, it's going to take a little bit of time. It's going to be Minshew to start.
And you know what's interesting too, Jimmy, is not everybody's on the same timeline.
Yeah.
We talked about this before, is Shane Steichen, he's got more slack, right, in terms of patience and building it. It's not the same thing with Chris Ballard.
Oh.
So if the Colts have a bunch of losses in 2023 and Anthony Richardson doesn't show great promise, that is way worse for Chris Ballard than it is Shane Steichen. So that's what's interesting too. The key guys in this organization, they are on different timelines. You ever play the video game where you've got a certain amount of time to get to the next checkpoint?
Yeah.
Like, Shane Steichen has more time to get to that next checkpoint than Chris Ballard does, and that makes things even more difficult to figure out, because you can talk yourself into anything. You can talk yourself into, hey, best way to learn is on the job. And yeah, great, because it's built on hope that things go well, and it's working in your favor instead of going against what you're hoping to accomplish. I just hope they don't talk themselves into something that isn't what's happening.
Yep.
Like, you could blindly say, oh, man, that was a great out throw in day 2 of minicamp. But if he doesn't know everything that he needs to know to at least have a fighting chance to not create bad habits, I think you just got to be honest with yourself. I don't know that they will.
The lines are blurred a bit for me, and maybe, the diehard Colts fans think this is ludicrous, but the line has always been blurred for me what kind of leash Ballard actually has, because in any other franchise, I'd be right there with you and think, yeah, he's probably on a hotter seat, but I was surprised he survived last season. Mm-hmm. And when they let go of Reich, I thought Ballard was soon to follow, and then it turns out that's not the case. Like, Jim Irsay still believes in Ballard. He likes what he's trying to build there, and if that is to a point where another bad season doesn't impact fully Irsay's evaluation of the situation, they might be on the same timeline. because he might have these two once again join at the hip of, okay, this is my general manager and this is my head coach. I want them both judged based on how they work in concert with one another. I agree with you. That's, of all the history of the league, more than likely, that's not what it is. More than likely, it is Ballard's on a shorter leash, but that line has been totally blurred for me, the fact that all of what happened wasn't just Frank Reich's fault. You could argue a lot of it was the way the roster had been built by Chris Ballard. Yet, it didn't matter at the end of the day. He has a new lease on life here. He finally has his franchise quarterback, at least he thinks he does. Is he on a same timeline of how Richardson pans out? Or is it indeed earlier like you would think because of how long he's been here at this point in time?
Well, hey, I hear you. There are a couple of things. One, Jim Irsay is unpredictable.
Indeed.
Okay, so
you saw the tweet on Friday.
You throw that into the mix, of, hey, do we draft Levis also? Do the Montana Young thing? Yeah, he's unpredictable. So what you just explained could be the way it is. I have a real hard time believing
As do I. Again,
yeah.
I like, if you made me say what I think is going to happen, yeah, I agree with you. It's just, it has been blurred a bit for me throughout this process.
Yeah. I think that, listen, if we're on a boat and we're taking on water here and they just threw Frank Reich out of the boat, like Chris Ballard's the next dude to get thrown out of the boat. Yeah. It's not going to be Shane Steichen. It's not going to be Anthony Richardson before Chris Ballard. Right. It's just not. So that's the way I see it. But look, to your point, some GMs, Steve Keim with the Arizona Cardinals, before he stepped down and is no longer the GM, like he had a lot of slack. I mean, there are a lot of GMs. He's like, yeah, I'll draft Rosen, 10th overall. And a change of plans. Let's go Kyler Murray the next year, number 1 overall. There are not a lot of GMs that could get away with doing something like that. And so it does vary from place to place and based on a number of things. The relationship between the GM and the team owner, all sorts of stuff. So, yeah, it's not the same for everybody. I just have a hard time believing this isn't year 3 or year 2. I mean, this is, what did you say, year 6, the 6th draft he just had? Yep. So that's a different ball game right there.
You would almost think that, are you surprised of Ballard's approach of patience with him? Because it would seem like regardless of how you truly evaluated the prospect, a tactical move by Ballard.
Right.
Because you'd have a built-in extra year if you're preaching patience, and that's ultimately what they do. Because if Richardson isn't on the field, you can't make a full evaluation knee-jerky of was he a good pick or was he a bad pick. So are you surprised that is the messaging there versus Steichen was kind of on board with that, but he had more in the lines of, the best way to learn is to go into the fire. And then Jim Irsay was the complete polar opposite of, he's going to play next season. It will happen.
I would, it's going to be a random answer for you here, Jimmy, but I would look at LeBron James. Now follow me on this one, okay? I'll bring it back to Chris Ballard. With LeBron, he is a team-first player.
Yes.
His style of play is team-first. You can't tell me that there's no layer whatsoever where LeBron thinks of himself as well. Like it's a two-pronged thing, right? And so I think it's very comparable with an NFL GM. There are some people that would say, oh, no, Chris Ballard, he has the heart of a saint over here. It's all about the Colts. It's not about himself. I call BS on that. I think that he is very much focused on the best interest of the organization. But how can you, for a second, think that his best interest has no bearing whatsoever on how things play out? I just don't buy that at all.
Yeah.
It goes against human nature. So it's hard to figure out when you're saying, hey, let's preach patience. That might be best for the Colts. That might also be good for Chris Ballard. Like, how does the pie chart break down exactly? There's no way to know what's in the guy's chest. We're making estimated guesses, but I would tell you there's no way that pie chart is 100% Colts, 0% Chris Ballard. There's zero chance that's the case.
I mean, it's not. To be human is to at some point have your self-interest line there.
Yeah.
Right? So
I don't have even a ballpark answer for you, but there's just no way. And listen, we've said this before. Chris Ballard has, I think, a good enough body of work where if he got ousted this next season, I think he would land on his feet somewhere else.
I do too.
Chances are he probably believes that also. So I think that gives more of a chance that he would be more likely to be team first, his view on everything, versus Ballard first, his view on everything. I think that gives you, some rope to look at things a bit differently.
Even with Ballard's perceived pressure, at this point, the decision on Richardson, and I think you agree with this, I think most Colts fans do as well, it's out of Ballard's court at this point. We can talk all the time we want about who has more say when drafting a prospect. Now that he's here, you brought Shane Steichen in here for a reason. Whether you think he's a quarterback whisperer or not, he's the one that is going to be getting the performance out of these guys Sundays throughout the year. It should ultimately be his decision in my mind, regardless of the job security at Bay, what they do with Anthony Richardson. I think it will.
Yeah, and listen, we've seen it here with Irsay, where it's like, hey, play this guy. It's happened in other organizations as well. I'm with you. If you hired Steichen because you believe in him and you think he can get the very best out of the QB you drafted, being Anthony Richardson, then let him do his thing. You hire people and you empower them instead of looking over their shoulder and micromanaging them. So I hope that's the case, and I hope that Steichen does get that. Hey, coming up next, what will be the best matchups this year? It's something that you definitely have to ask yourself, especially in the AFC South. We'll get to that. I'm Brian Noe. He's Jimmy Cook. It's 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
The Fan.
I'm Brian Noe. He's Jimmy Cook here on The Fan. So, Jimmy, I was thinking about Motley Crue over here, and there's a song, Girls, 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 and I love being in studio with you guys, man. You guys are awesome.
We love having you here.
It's good to be here with you guys, man. I went Team Fritos instead of Team Doritos today. I figure less mess. I had to have a Dane Fife-like snack during the show.
There you go.
Not as easy to digest and quiet as applesauce, which Dane is a big fan of. I like how Dane goes either applesauce or cashews. Polar opposite snacks right there in terms of noises, and that's great. Okay, so I was thinking about this, Jimmy. So the NFL schedule, it's going to be unveiled, I think, May 11th, I believe, is the date.
But a week from tomorrow. We're very excited.
Very excited about this. So ask yourself this. We don't know, and it matters, when these AFC South matchups will be for the Colts. They could have 3 very early on. They could have 5 of them later in the season.
They will probably play 2 against the Titans before October, because that's what's happened like the last two years. And you're like, oh, these division games, glad we got them out of the way early.
Man, that was
Thanks for the drama, NFL.
It was an ugly game on the road last year against the Titans. Yep. Like, losing a low-scoring road game, it's just tougher to stomach, I think. But anyway, what are going to be the best matchups within the division? I mean, like, this is probably a stupid question, but try to take your Colts rooting interest out of this for a second. You're as unbiased as you can get, okay? You've got the 3 rookies, And let's say that they're all playing by this stage in the season. Okay? You got Stroud with the Texans. You got Clay Richardson, who can be molded with the Colts. You've got Will the Thrill Levis.
Yep.
Okay? So honestly, what is the matchup at the top of the list? Is it C.J. Stroud and Anthony Richardson being on the field at the same time? Is it Anthony Richardson and Will Levis, who the Colts could have drafted, on the field at the same time? In the same game, if you want to be technical, and not at the same time, but on the same field, right? What would be at the top of your list?
From just like an excitement and storyline standpoint?
I'm so geeked for this matchup. Let's say one of these matchups is featured on Thursday Night Football, and you're like, oh, man, it is this QB versus this QB, same field, sign me up. That's at the top of the list for you. What is it?
It's Levis versus Richardson.
Yeah.
And it's not just because of the ties there, of the Colts having the opportunity to take Levis. It is that for years and years, you could pick any team in the division, right? The Colts just pummeled everybody. And then you've had this 4-year cycle where, yeah, they're wherever we're at now in terms of just the absences of division dominance. They've gotten their labs in, the rest of the division. And now you're a turning point for both of those franchises. Jaguars already feel like that they are the clubhouse leader right now. They have the Peyton Manning. They have the Andrew Luck in Trevor Lawrence. That's what they believe. So now you're looking in division at a team that is your closest foe, and the idea of either fan base looking each other in the eyes and thinking, oh no, they now have the franchise quarterback. It's a knee-jerk reaction, but that's what happens on a week-to-week sport where there's only one game per week. It's what would happen instantly if they face each other on the field, even though they aren't on the field at the same time. Whoever comes away with that win, and if the other quarterback made more impact plays than the Colts quarterback, they're going to come away thinking, that's right, you have the bust. We're the ones that have the generational talent that's going to dominate the division for the next 10, 15 years.
I might surprise you a bit. Mm-hmm. And I'm not doing this for dramatic effect. This is what I really believe. If you're asking me the AFC South quarterback matchup, like the rookies, right? Who's facing who? The one I'm most interested in, it would be C.J. Stroud versus Anthony Richardson.
Really?
Yeah, it really would, because C.J. Stroud, there was so much positivity with this guy. Oh, man, he's more pro-ready, and I'm just highly skeptical. He's gonna be missing 5 first-round wide receivers potentially, going from Ohio State to the Houston Texans.
The Ohio State.
Thank you, Eddie. The Ohio State. That is a huge step down in talent. I don't buy C.J. Stroud, especially in his rookie season. I can't wait to see how that unfolds. And Anthony Richardson, it's going to be rocky at the beginning. To only have 393 passing attempts in college, that is such a small sample size. And he wasn't electric like Michael Vick, on the doorstep of a national championship. Right. Cam Newton winning the Heisman, winning a national championship. He was nowhere near that level. And so to see how he starts his career initially, with that being a top 5 matchup, Stroud going number 2, Anthony Richardson going number 4, the divisional tie-in with, let's say Richardson looks better initially. You know how it's going to go. It's like, man, the Texans could have had this guy. Mm-hmm. I think that is going to be fascinating.
And there's no real wrong answer with this exercise, because since it turned into an AFC South conglomerate, basically, of selections in the draft, like with the quarterback class outside of Bryce Young, the other top 3 off the board are all in division now. Fan bases and owners for all 3 of those teams can look at their respective GMs in the eye and say, why'd they end up with this guy? And you could say, well, the Colts really only had a choice between Levis and Richardson. And that's fair, but if Stroud in the long run winds up being the best of the bunch, there was one pathway for the Colts to do it, or the Titans to do it. That would have been to go trade up with Chicago. You would have had to give up a ton to do it, but it's no longer, they're out of division, you can forget about them. No, you can't. You're going to play them twice a year. They're going to follow everybody's legacy to just magnitudes that we don't often see at that position, and all the different variables or butterfly effects that could have happened if a team goes a different way with one of those picks.
This is going to sound like an idiotic question.
Okay.
I'm just preparing you.
Thank you.
But I
feel prepared.
really do think there could be something to this. Okay? Think about this. So you've got Stroud, I always call him Anderson.
I know.
Anthony Richardson. Why do I do that? And Will the Thrill Levis. I don't screw his name up for obvious reasons. Stardom.
Disrespect that would be there.
Sorry. Does the fact that there are 3 quarterbacks in the same division that will, at some point, maybe in their rookie season, be facing each other on the field, does that take a little, even a skosh of pressure off of Bryce Young, who's not in the same division as another draft pick? Now, listen, the Panthers traded 2 first-round picks, 2 second-round picks, and DJ Moore. There's a lot expected from Bryce Young. You hardly heard anything outside of the frame, the size, don't know if he's going to hold up. You hardly heard anything negative about him processing on the field, accuracy. Like you heard, he doesn't have a cannon for an arm, but it was mild in terms of criticism compared to Stroud and Levis in particular, right?
Yes.
Does that help him a bit? Think about this. I think Levis and Richardson on the same football field, it just puts both of them under the microscope that much more. I think Stroud versus, Richardson on the same field, I think that puts both quarterbacks under the microscope a little bit more, puts them on center stage. I think that does help Bryce Young a bit.
I think it could help in the early goings in the national conversation because this is such a compelling storyline that having all those quarterbacks in the same division, that might be what dominates headlines on a weekly basis because they're going to have the chance to battle it out. I don't know in terms of the day-to-day, it has a massive impact, but that's not what you're looking for. You're looking for just a minor tweak on it. Yeah, I could see that because you are no longer the singular headline on ESPN.com or NFL.com in a way that you would if they were perhaps spread out. If these 3 are going to be battling it out and Bryce Young is putting up solid numbers, yeah, maybe it does relieve a little bit of it. I don't think that's as crazy as you prepared me a little bit, but I don't think that's as crazy.
I prepared you for craziness, It's like the rock quarry over at Ball State, There's this rock quarry. You can jump into the water. And some of my friends, the first time I went there, they're like, they talked it up like, you're going to look down and be like, oh my God. They talked it up like you could basically see hell from the top of this rock quarry cliff. And when I saw it, I'm like, that's it?
Yep.
Right? Because they talked it up, so maybe that's what
the oversell.
Happened. Yep. Maybe that's what I should do with all my questions now. Is just prepare you for this could be outlandish, crazy, and then I sound reasonable. That's the missing link here the whole time. All right, we got Joe Rexrode. He's a writer and a columnist for The Athletic Nashville. On a scale from 1 to 10, how many obnoxious questions am I going to ask this guy when the Titans landed Will the Thrill Levis? What do you think?
On a scale of 1 to 10, you got to go 10, but in terms of over-under on how many ridiculous questions, I'm saying 3.5.
You're taking the over. That I might only ask 5 questions.
I know. I was trying to do the math there.
All right, we got Joe around the corner. I'm Brian Noe. He's Jimmy Cook. It's 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
7-5, The Fan.
I'm Brian Noe. He's Jimmy Cook here on The Fan. Want to welcome in Joe Rexrode, senior writer and columnist for The Athletic Nashville. You know, Joe, I got to try to hide my jealousy that you guys landed Will the Thrill Levis. I'm being dead serious. I think that he's the better quarterback than Anthony Richardson. Indianapolis collectively hates my guts right now, not doing it for dramatic effect. But, Joe, I've got Will the Thrill jealousy over here. What do you think about that?
Well, you should talk to some Titans fans.
Do they hate the move, Joe?
So, well, here's the thing. You obviously have a pretty big cross-section of Titans fans who are also Tennessee Volunteers fans, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That's about 99% hate it, okay? So, and so there's a couple of things. One is, you know, obviously the last couple of years the Vols have played against him, and Will Levis is he's outspoken on the field. He's a little brash. So I think there was already a personal dislike. But then also last year they took such pleasure in he threw for 98 yards and 3 picks in a 44-6 loss against an average at best defense, right? So not only do they not like him, and not only did they enjoy that, but they watched that and they're like, this guy stinks. So I mean, there's a lot of that. I do think that by far Will Levis was the least popular of the 5 quarterbacks who could have been selected by the Titans. And there's also the Hendon Hooker aspect here. Of course, a lot of those same people were really hoping they'd take him. And we actually have at 102.5, the game here in Nashville, our afternoon host also was so desperate for them to draft Anthony Richardson that on our draft show he basically had a complete meltdown on the air about it. So I mean, there's a lot going on here. I think people are talking themselves into Will Levis, but yeah, maybe you could give them a pep talk.
I'm free for hire. I won't even charge, Joe. I'll go on with you, no problem.
Joe, you know how it goes, right? Everybody talks themselves into it. It won't take long.
Yeah.
Joe, I'm not quite as high on Will Levis. In fact, I'd say I'm exactly the opposite of my co-host here. But all that being said, I want to pivot to the other quarterback in Nashville, in Ryan Tannehill. This is now the second year in a row that he's had to have what I imagine was in some ways uncomfortable press conference for him, talking about the elephant in the room, which is a potential heir apparent at QB. How was his tone today different, if at all, than last year?
Yeah, that's a great question, and he just wrapped it up. So last year, it was a little different. First of all, last year he didn't come to the voluntary stuff early. He did this year, so we talked to him a lot later. Last year he had a comment about Malik Willis, and it went absolutely nuts. It was on every argument show, and basically it's not my job to mentor him, which, in the proper context, that quote was basically like, hey, I'm here to help, I'm here to be a good teammate, but, it's not my job to mentor him. But, of course, you take out just those words, and it sounds like he was sort of having his own little tantrum about it. So he kind of took a lot of heat between that and not coming here. And he was coming off the playoff disaster, so there was he was telling us a lot about, going to see a therapist and dealing with the mental health aspect of that playoff failure. So, it's different because this year, he's here early, and I don't think there's anything that he said that's going to, get him in trouble. But also this year, it is different. He knows this is it. He knows this is last year now. Last year, there was still a reasonable expectation. There was still a reasonable question about whether Malik Willis would ever actually challenge him for the job. We thought at the time, okay, this time this year, that'll be a competition. Well, after a year with Malik Willis, it's obvious they don't think a lot about him because they just drafted over him. But to that, they also moved up to the second round to get a guy who was a first-round projection, and it's pretty obvious to Ryan Tannehill, or maybe more than obvious, it may be stated clearly, he wouldn't get into conversations, that this is it. This is an opportunity to quarterback this team and really try to set himself up for a future somewhere else. So it is very different from that perspective.
We're talking the Titans with Joe Rexrode here on The Fan. There was a lot of talk and speculation that the Titans might move up from number 11 to number 3 to go with the quarterback. based on those rumors leading up to the draft, who was the quarterback that most Titans fans wanted?
Well, that's a good question. I know the Titans wanted C.J. Stroud, and they were trying to move up to get C.J. Stroud. So now, who the Titans fans wanted? Again, I do think a lot of people did want Hendon Hooker, and the idea of what if the Titans could trade back, get more picks because they need picks, but then also get Hendon Hooker late in the first, get that fifth-year option, et cetera, et cetera. That's probably the number. He'd probably be close to number one. Certainly, plenty of people I'm sure would have liked Bryce Young, but you kind of knew as the draft grew near that wasn't going to happen. And look, I still think a lot more people wanted Anthony Richardson than Will Levis. And that's how the way I kind of framed it going in is like, I personally would draft Richardson over Levis just because I think the ceiling with Richardson is outrageously high, and the floor is lower probably, but the ceiling's so high. And they're kind of similar, right? They have great traits, but we haven't seen consistent performance yet. What does that mean? Lately in the NFL, we've seen more guys like that actually work out in the league. But I think Levis would have been last, and
Joe, you still with us?
Yeah, did you guys lose me?
Yeah, we lost you there for a second. We got you now. I wanted to have you take us through what changed or what the Titans shared, if anything, that changed with their draft process in trading up to get Will Levis, because you've mentioned it already. Dane Brugler had a grade of first round for Will Levis. They have an opportunity to go get him with pick 11. They don't. They address offensive line instead. What changed within that front office? Was it the value? Was it the idea that your rivals now have two potential franchise quarterbacks and you can't afford to pass this up? Well, what changed with them to trade up to go get Will Levis in round 2?
Well, like you said, it wasn't the last thing because they knew that when they came up at 11, right?
Right.
So it's a great question. The way they explained it, and if you look at their whole draft, they needed a receiver by far the biggest need. If you just look at positional needs, they needed a receiver way more than anything else. They didn't get a receiver until the 7th round. They took a running back in the 3rd round when there was still a lot of, well-rated receivers available. So I take them at their word that they absolutely went faithful to their big board, and they were shocked that Peter Skoronski was available. They thought he'd be gone, so they took him at 11. Now, then it's like, okay. In my mind, it was like, all right, well, then they're trying to actually have the best possible team for this swan song for Henry and Tannehill, and they're going to have to figure out quarterback another way. And if Tannehill's really good, he might get another deal. And then they move up and get Levis in a second. I think the answer is they didn't think he'd be there. They figured someone would be grabbing Levis late in the first. There was some reporting. I don't have this confirmed. There was some reporting that they made some calls to try to get late first to get him, but weren't able to do it. And Buffalo was one of the teams that has been mentioned. They ended up sticking and taking a tight end. But basically, I feel like they just looked at it and said, well, gosh, he's still there. What a value to be able to get him and also still get Skoronski. So I guess you could say they lucked out. But also it's like, so how much do you love Will Levis if you were willing to just let him slide at 11?
Yeah.
He's Joe Rexrode from The Athletic and ESPN 102.5 The Game in Nashville. I got this cold thing going on here, Joe. I don't know what's going on with my voice, man, but I'm powering through. I'm powering through like Will Levis through the negativity over there in Nashville. But how bad is it? Paint a picture for us. Is Will Levis right now less popular than Malik Willis with Titans fans? Is it that bad?
Oh no!
Okay.
Oh no!
Okay, good.
And again, we're at Wednesday, and I knew this would happen. It's already pivoted toward. You know what? This guy does have some talent.
Yes, yeah.
You know how it goes. Mm-hmm. Look. The funny thing is, I wrote a column last week for The Athletic, and I said, okay, if you go process of elimination and read the tea leaves, this is what's going to happen. And I wrote they were going to end up with Will Levis. I actually wrote they might have to move up to like 6 or 8 to get him, right? But when I wrote that column, the response was, "I'm done being a Titans fan then, so I'm out." And initially when they drafted him, at least one Titans fan made like a feeble effort to like burn their old Eddie George jersey and put it on Twitter.
Geez.
So, so the initial reaction was, and even at Monday morning, largely negative. It's already transitioned. I mean, like you have to embrace it. And I mean, look, if you can step back at all, I mean, you like Levis. I mean, look, I don't think it's outrageous to think he can be really good.
Yeah.
He's got a lot of things you like. I think one of the things I like the most about him is he was at Kentucky for like a week, and his teammates voted him a captain. Like, I mean, I think he does have some natural leadership. I know that he impressed Vrabel in the visit here, which is not easy to do. You know, it's just a matter of finding consistency. And look, Kentucky had a bad offensive line. They had freshman receivers. Like, there's a lot of excuses you can make for the guy, and that's the process that is going on right now with Titans fans.
Joe, it's a tale as old as time. Once the draft happens, how quickly can you simulate where the depth chart's going to go with 4 months in between? So I continue that exercise with you. We've done it with Anthony Richardson here the last couple of days. What's his timeline with the Titans, and will there be a legitimate quarterback competition this training camp and into the preseason?
Well, I'll be really surprised if he could threaten Tannehill. Tannehill's still good. You know, Tannehill's a good player. I mean, last year, I actually was really impressed with what Ryan Tannehill did with arguably the worst offensive line in the league. And, you know, they trade away A.J. Brown, and he's relying on a rookie, and, you know, can't really play. I was actually really impressed with him last year. I think Tannehill will prove to be a lot better than Will Levis. I'm sure they'll try to make it a competition, but I think Tannehill will be the starter. And, you know, if they're not good enough and they're losing enough, at some point you can see the transition happening. But, look, I think Will Levis has a chance to work out. I think the best case for him is to not play. I think the same thing at Richardson. I know there's all that talk up there that he's going to play this year. I personally would rather just let him not play at all. I think Malik Willis was hurt a lot by having to play last year. He just wasn't ready. But look, Will Levis is going to get his shot in 2024. Tannehill's performance in 19 and 20 in particular, that is a high bar. My question is, will he ever get to that point? I mean, I don't know. But I think that this year it will definitely be Tannehill as long as they are still viable in the AFC South race.
Hey, Joe, great stuff, man. Appreciate your time, and we'll catch you down the road.
All right, guys. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Joe.
For sure. Joe Rexrode, senior writer and columnist for The Athletic Nashville, also on the radio, too. Did a good job. ESPN 102.5, The Game. Wow, that I love how quickly things turn. You know, immediately, this guy went to Kentucky. It's just crawling with Tennessee Volunteer fans in Nashville. What are we doing? To now, just a couple of days later, you know, he's got some talent. Didn't have a good offensive line, you know.
Fandom is undefeated.
There's
really
some things to love. Yeah,
Yep.
It is. It is funny how that goes, man. But I thought that was a really interesting point at the end that you could tie to Anthony Richardson here in Indianapolis, is Joe saying that Malik Willis was hurt by playing last season. And ask yourself this, what if they sit Malik Willis for the entire season? They might not even draft Will Levis if that's the case. So two schools of thought, right? Is throwing a guy out there before he's really ready. That hurt Malik Willis. But you can also look at it on the other side and say, hey, man, he was so far behind that we're pivoting. We're just going in a different direction. So even if it's not the answer that you want, at least having bad information sooner, right? Like information that is not flattering for your new draft pick, at least you know sooner that you need to change course. If we're out to sea, let's do the Bering Sea. You ever watch, what's the show with the...
Deadliest Catch?
Yeah, that's right. I got to interview a couple of those guys in the same studio, and they're wild. But Deadliest Catch. Yeah. If we're in the Bering Sea and we see danger ahead, it's better to pivot.
Right.
And so the Titans know that sooner than if they had rested him. So interesting how you could play both sides of that argument.
This is easier for me to say because I'm not a general manager in the National Football League. If they whenever they do it, trot out Anthony Richardson, and the level of confidence and evaluation in his play is hand the ball off. We do not trust you to try to throw the ball down. Fire me on the spot. I don't think that's what this is. I know you and I had initial back and forth very early on after the combine of, does it really matter where you went to school, right? Shouldn't matter. And there's been plenty of aspects where, no, you can go to any school in America, and if you have the goods, you'll get an opportunity to play in the NFL if someone wants to take a chance on you. I was never high on Malik Willis. We talk about how do the networks pump up quarterbacks for the sake of pumping up quarterbacks. I felt like that happened with him, but I couldn't even have imagined it was going to be what happened last year. So he's right. That makes you have a pause for a second. But if that's where Richardson's evaluation is and they still throw him out there, it's a fireable offense for multiple people within West 56th Street.
Well, and also, man, it changes fast. There are a lot of young quarterbacks that are high draft picks who don't get a whole lot of time. Look at Zach Wilson with the Jets. Now, he's been freaking brutal. Don't get me wrong. But it's not like he's had 3 seasons, and now you're like, okay, clearly this is not the guy.
Well, he's gonna give Rodgers hell. I mean, he said that. So
Rodgers is just shaking his boots over there. But you know what I'm saying? Think about Trey Lance, the Niners quarterback. They traded all this draft capital to go from 12 to 3. He started a few games. That's it. And they're on to what, Mr. Irrelevant? Brock Purdy might be the guy after elbow surgery. Like, it comes at you fast. And so I think today where we sit with Anthony Richardson, it feels like, oh, man, they're going to give him 3 years. That's not promised at all. You know, if he's clearly not the guy, think about Malik Willis. I know he's not the number 4 overall pick, and that matters. The money that you're investing, like the timeline's going to be a little bit different. Malik Willis was a 3rd-round pick. They saw enough where they signed Joshua Dobbs off the street and gave him like a week and a half to digest the playbook and said, you're a better option right now. That was fast.
Yes.
Your Chiefs made Malik Willis look pretty bad.
They did.
And there wasn't much time.
Which doesn't usually happen because Vrabel, for some reason, always gives Andy Reid and the Chiefs headaches, save the 2019 AFC Championship game, but I digress. But anyway, to your larger point.
Where Mariota threw himself a touchdown?
No, that was the divisional round a couple years ago. I'm talking about the AFC title win where Mahomes scrambled for 40 yards before halftime and put him up.
Yeah.
But yeah, the Chiefs historically don't do well against the AFC South for whatever reason. They just don't. But back to Malik Willis and just what's at stake here for Indianapolis. You mentioned the recklessness of the Cardinals and how they went back-to-back drafts drafting quarterback. Like, so many things would have to go wrong. You would have to start Anthony Richardson week 1, and it would have to be clear and obvious. Mayday, eject button. Thank goodness we still have our first-round pick. I don't envision that path, but you're right. It's such a thin margin league.
Yeah.
You're back at the top of the draft next year. If things went completely south, you've heard what the quarterbacks can do next year. Like, that's a tough conversation. It's not one anybody wants to have. I don't think that's a conversation we're going to have a year from now, but that's how thin this league is.
Right. It happens quickly. I would bring up Mac Jones with the Patriots, where he was right there, neck and neck, to be the offensive rookie of the year. Jamar Chase, the Bengals wide receiver, he edged Mac Jones at the very end 2 seasons ago. Pretty good year. Certainly the best of any rookie quarterback Mac Jones had 2 years ago. Last year, a step back, but good Lord, there's a little bit of like a Will Levis syndrome. He had a defensive coordinator calling offensive plays. He didn't have a who's who around him in terms of pass catchers. And now it's like, screw this guy. There are rumors about him being on the trade block. You know? It happens fast, is all I'm telling you. And listen, I hope that Anthony Richardson has a lot of slack. You know, I hope that there is true patience, because there are going to be a lot of peaks and valleys. I don't see any other way it's going to go. But I think that there's this false sense of security today. If you're looking at the Colts and evaluating where they're heading over the next 3 years plus with Anthony Richardson, it just feels today like he's got a lot more runway than he realistically does, because that's just life in the NFL, man. They pivot. Yeah. They're just like, you know what? We gave it enough time, and it might not have been, but to them it feels like an eternity, and they move on.
And the reason for the hope and optimism is because of the upside that's being sold, right? Like you were, when we went back and forth on Levis and Richardson, it's the floor is with one guy, but the ceiling on the other guy, it's going to surpass him to a point where, I mean, you heard Joe talking about it with where like Tannehill's at. Like if, for a lot of quarterbacks, if you could have the type of career that Ryan Tannehill has had, you'd be happy with that, right? I know he struggled early on in Miami, but got a second opportunity, made the most of it, can tell everybody, kids, grandkids, I made it in the NFL. I was an NFL quarterback. But with where this arms race is right now, you can't afford for that to be what he is.
I know.
And I'm not saying Anthony Richardson is going to be the next Mahomes, the next Jalen Hurts, but like you cannot afford with where the AFC is right now to have a Ryan Tannehill.
Yeah.
You can't.
It's true. It's
like he could say all he wants, like, oh yeah, Tannehill had bad weapons last year. That's fine. 2 or 3 years ago, I was pounding the desk about it. They were the weakest 1 seed I've ever seen. Like, no, there was no way they were going to go to the Super Bowl. Year. It was. Oh, the Pro Bowl. Oh, jeez. Yeah.
And that was the 3 picks he threw against the Bengals.
Like, and I know that Cincinnati was the surprise that year, and they wound up dethroning Kansas City in overtime. They lost in the Super Bowl to the Rams, but even had it been Kansas City and Tennessee, they were an afterthought for me.
Yeah.
And for a lot of people, like, it's just, when you have a quarterback like that, same thing with the Vikings right now with Kirk Cousins. Is he better than Tannehill? Yes, but you're capped to a point.
Right. How much of a difference is it making? Mm-hmm. That's the thing is, it's crazy. This sounds like I'm disagreeing. I'm really not. Tannehill, who's been between average and good at times. That's where he is.
Fine to good,
Yeah. I say that he's average at worst. And some people misinterpret that where I'm saying, he's freaking awesome. No, he's like average at worst. But he's good at best. Mm-hmm. You know, that's where he is. And so what's sobering is Tannehill has been, although average mostly, way better than a lot of first-round picks.
Yes.
That's what's crazy. And I'm with you, where he's not good enough to be a real difference maker. And you're hoping to do much better with whoever you draft. But the sobering reality is he's been worlds better than Jamarcus Russell, Ryan Leaf, like the list goes on and on. Mm-hmm. Zach Wilson from a couple of years ago. Like, it's crazy to think of it like that, where we're like, ew, gross, Tannehill. Tannehill is like a supermodel compared to some of these other duds. You know?
And that's the crapshoot that is the NFL draft, because everybody wants to swing for the fence and get a big-time quarterback. Sometimes you get average. Sometimes that happens, and how do you work around that? Are you able to maximize what he does well, which the Titans have tried their darndest to do the last 3 or 4 years? Great running game, solid defense, defensive mind. Oh, we have A.J. Brown, that's going to work. And eventually, for whatever reason, whether it's because they felt a pivot was needed in the franchise or lunacy, they get rid of Brown, they cash out there, and you're asking a quarterback that was only at his peak because of what you built around him to elevate like a Rodgers or Mahomes or Brady does, and it's just not in what he is as a QB.
You know what it would be like? Is like, we know Josh Allen, the Bills quarterback, is much better than Tannehill. How do you think Josh Allen would look if you just shipped Stephon Diggs out of town and didn't have a comparable replacement? His numbers would take a hit, right? And you're asking Tannehill,
right,
who's not as good as Josh Allen, to what? Not skip a beat?
Right.
Like make up the difference? Just make it happen?
And that's your biggest question mark, which I agree with you on it, with C.J. Stroud, as we bring the whole South together.
Yeah.
He is getting that magnified times 10
in
terms of taking all of the luxuries that he had away.
Yeah.
And he's going to have to, you talk about ups and downs with Richardson, there's going to be growing pains there too. How does he get through year one? And how do the Texans ultimately realize, well, we're not going to be able to get, what's the number now, if next year pans out, 7 first-round wideouts?
They have at least 5, most likely.
Right. We're not going to be able to get an assortment of that, but how do we get 1 or 2 guys that can help take him where we hope he can go? And if he's more close to a Ryan Tannehill or, God forbid, like a Zach Wilson, it's never happening.
Yeah.
But if he is, he actually has the goods, you don't need all 5 to be able to make yourself better. Josh Allen in that scenario, he's still a high-level QB. Numbers take a dip, but he's still a high-level QB because you know he's capable of it, even if Diggs is off the table. Tannehill, not so much.
Not so much. And that's the thing is, I think C.J. Stroud is much closer to Tannehill than he is Josh Allen. because I use Justin Fields, the Bears quarterback, as this example of if you look at Justin Fields, that 6 touchdown performance against Clemson, who he was throwing to, he was throwing to the 10th, 11th, and 12th overall picks, and Jackson Smith and Jigba, who was just 20th overall. He had all these guys. He had Garrett Wilson from the Jets. He had Chris Olave from the Saints. He had Jameson Williams, who hadn't transferred to Alabama yet, who caught a touchdown pass in that game against Clemson. He had 10, 11, 12, and 20. He had 4 first-rounders. Look at what he's done with the Bears passing-wise. His passer rating's around 80. That's in the toilet. And granted, he's got Equanimous St. Brown and Darnell Mooney, who's okay, but he's not a true one. So it's not E equals MC squared. You got to take a guy like Justin Fields, who had a who's who of talent around him, and put much better talent around him than he's had to deal with in Chicago. It's the same thing with C.J. Stroud, yet we act like he's what? He's this miracle/difference maker who's just going to make it happen? He's way closer to Tannehill.
And that's the part where you and I deviate. Like, we agree with the idea that there's going to be regression. The idea of thinking that he's going to come out and light the world on fire is against logic. It's not impossible, but it's against what most of time will tell you. The larger question is whether he's closer to Tannehill or not. I think there's a good chance if you supply him with a true number one, like all these other quarterbacks. Like, I'm going to be banging on the table again next draft. If Anthony Richardson is indeed the guy with the goods, go get him a number 1 wide receiver.
Sure.
Go find him a weapon. How does a guy like Stroud, how does a guy like Levis, how does Anthony Richardson, any of this class, and how we will judge them will not just be their play on the field. How did the front offices address the needs to complement them on offense? And did they help them to become the quarterbacks that they evaluated them for during their draft process?
No doubt. Man, we are chatty today.
We are.
There are so many angles. So much good stuff here, Jay Cook.
Amen.
All right, coming up next, we shift gears a little bit. Tyrese Halliburton. Very positive about Jordan Poole last night, and he is being raked over the coals for his positivity.
And if I may, too, we have a pair of GMR Grand Prix tickets to give away. That's next weekend. We will have a trivia question for you if you want to be a part of that. 317-239-1070.
I hope it's Will Levis related. Crossing my fingers.
We'll discuss at the break.
That's coming up. 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
The Fan.
I'm Brian Noe. He's Jimmy Cook. Man, I make one Will Levis joke. And crickets? Really? Come on, fan
The
listeners.
silence is deafening.
My goodness.
317-239-1070 if you want a chance to win a pair of tickets to next weekend's GMR Grand Prix at IMS. We'll have an Indy 500 question for you after a discussion during the break and a look to our panel to figure out what the best question was. We'll go Indy 500 division. Again, that's 317-239-1070 if you want a chance for a pair of tickets.
Personally, I think it would be a hilarious bit. I'm a big fan of radio bits. And so my idea is, anytime I'm filling in with you here, Jay Cook, is the answer is automatically Will the Thrill Levis. It could be the most outlandish. So this guy took calculus in his freshman year and took basket weaving in his sophomore year. Like, you would never know this. And the only way to get the tickets is just to randomly go with Will the Thrill Levis. I think that would be just tremendous right there. No? You not as much?
I don't think I would enjoy that as much as you would, but I understand why you would get a great kick out of that.
I'm all about it, man. We got a lot to do. We got to get to Tyrese Halliburton. He is being called out for his positivity about Jordan Poole. I also want to get to these draft picks that were widely unpopular with a fan base the night of the draft that turned out to be great players for those organizations. Because we're talking about Will Levis going to the Titans. How hilarious is it? I never really understood the full
scope
landscape right there. Is you have all these Tennessee Volunteer fans who saw Levis do nothing against Tennessee last year in a 44-6 blowout. He doesn't even throw for 100 yards. You want Hendon Hooker? That's our guy. And they trade up to get Will Levis.
It's painful.
That is beautiful right there. That is hilarious. Okay, we got people here?
We do.
Okay.
We're going to go first in to the shoot. We're going to take Chris. Chris, how are you?
Pretty good.
All right, guys. Doing good. Glad to hear it. This will be Indy 500 related, and since I'm feeling nice, it's not quite as easy as who won last year, but I'd like to think it's a relatively easy question. Who is the all-time lap leader in Indy 500 history?
Ooh. Wow.
Ooh. Is it Helio?
No, but hang tight. We might come back to you. So
I'm thinking we might come back to him like 4 times. That's a tough one, Jimmy. Jeez.
Randy.
Yes, sir.
Same question for you. All-time lap leader, Indy 500 history.
Scott Dixon.
Yes!
Wow.
Well done, Randy.
Well done. Very well done.
Congratulations.
Outstanding.
You got 2 tickets to GMR Grand Prix. Hang tight for us. Eddie Garrison will gather your information. Congratulations.
Where is Emerson Fittipaldi on that list, Jimmy?
Let me pull the list back up. 7th.
How about really? Where's my guy Rick Mears?
12th.
12th. How about who else? How about Big Al? Nice display, by the way.
2nd.
2nd.
Yes.
Nice. There you go. Big Al Unser.
Yep.
Nice little display at the Indianapolis International Airport. And I saw that today. Got back from visiting Mickey in Orlando.
Did they just put? Was it not there when you took? Or I guess you were.
It was there before.
Did you leave out of Indy International too?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you saw it both times. Okay.
Yep. Yeah.
They're quick with that.
Hey,
right out of the gate.
They got all kinds of decorations over there now. Very cool. Like the all the pictures, like the trophy, like all
a lot
the
of old
stuff.
cars.
Very cool. I love the displays over there. I almost got a ticket because of the displays over here. Monument Circle. I didn't realize it was a one-way. Johnny Law
the
was
500
not fun.
decor is what ended up getting you. That's why you went rogue.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. Maybe I screwed it up, but I didn't see any like detour. Don't go. Stop it.
There are a couple side streets where you have to see it right away. If you miss it and turn, you're done. Like there's not 5 one-way signs. If you miss that initial one, you're going to go quite a ways before you're like, oh, what have I done? I've made a terrible mistake.
Okay, so you want the Halliburton over here? This is beautiful.
Give me the Halliburton.
So Tyrese Halliburton, he was on with my guy Channing Frye. I got to work with Channing Frye, former Blazer a little bit in Portland. He was good. He'd be on every Friday. And Taylor Rooks. Taylor Rooks does a very good job interviewing a lot of athletes. And so they're doing basically like a Manning cast, okay? You're very worried about Eddie if he has that.
I am slightly. Not that I don't trust him, but in terms of how we've wheelhouse things. I see you queuing this up, and here's what happened. And then it's like we're asking Joe a question and the signal cut out.
You are sweating bullets over here.
I feel bad for my boy. I don't want him to
peek behind the curtain. I plug in my computer, and Eddie Garrison on the wheels of steel, he's got to hit a button. And I feel confident the way Eddie is responding, he has hit that button.
All right.
I feel very confident. It'd be a good troll job if he hit that button again and then turned it off. Yeah, but this is Tyrese Halliburton of the Pacers. He was on NBA Twitter Live, kind of a Manning-style, Manning-cast presentation of the Lakers-Warriors game last night, Game 1. Jordan Poole took a shot from 28 feet away. He missed it in the final 10 seconds. Halliburton has no problem with the shot. Easy to say that Channing Frye and Taylor Rooks share a different opinion, but it's very funny. Check this out.
Double team him.
He's got to get off it, though. He's got to get off it.
Anybody else? What?
Oh, my God. He can't be
Ain't
serious.
no way. Taylor, what's wrong with that shot, guys? What's wrong with that shot?
Hold on now.
Can I see it again?
Who's
Can I see
taking
the
it?
script?
It's who's
Where did he take that from?
What do you want him to do? Take a dribble?
Dog, just 10 seconds left in the game.
But what if you're not going to get a better shot than that? You
Look
gonna
at
be
this. Look at this.
No contest?
Look at this.
I'm sorry. I'm cool if I'm going to
Where he's
stay.
shooting where Darvin Ham is. Get off the Henny from that far away with 10 seconds, and you have an advantage.
I'm shooting it. I'm shooting it if I'm Jordan. So I feel you, Jordan. I would have shot that too.
That's why you here with us. He gonna be here with us.
Don't listen to him.
I'm going to shoot that shot in the playoff game next year. When
Yeah, I hope you do.
if I make it, Channing, this is for you.
So, Tyrese, he would have pulled from 28, a la Jordan Poole. You know what's tough, Jimmy, is what Halliburton is saying could be true, maybe. What if that's the best shot they get as the seconds are ticking down? It's possible that's the best look, but it's a bad look if you miss from 28 and you've got the greatest shooter of all time and Steph Curry as your teammate. That's a rough look.
Additionally, I want to say, I don't know if this went through Jordan Poole's minds at all. He sees Anthony Davis out from underneath the paint. He's at like just above the free throw line. He's right around the semicircle there at the top of the key. So it's like it leaves for an opportunity for an offensive rebound, possibly if somebody's crashing.
Right.
But I was watching Tim Legler explain that this morning on Get Up, and he was like, this play all starts because Draymond and Jordan Poole don't really hustle back on offense. So there's 4 Laker defenders already back there against Steph Curry and Klay Thompson. Those were the only 2 guys on that side of the floor. I think Kevon Looney was at like midcourt, and then there's Draymond and Jordan Poole. They're just straggling behind, and then there's not enough spacing between Green and Poole to really open up even a better shot for Poole. So, I mean, there was a lot going on that even led up to the 3, but there's a lot that even to consider, too, and you can see just the dejection on Steph Curry's face, too, with the body language.
It was. He did, what was it, a super bad? Remember the weird guy who kind of like leans over? Like as he's talking to the, it's a terrible example if you haven't seen the movie, but that's kind of what Steph Curry did. He kind of just put both hands on his legs and leaned over, just like, what are we doing right now? I thought it should have been a jump ball. Looked like a tie-up from Klay, but they said timeout with, I think it was Schroeder.
Yep.
Which was weird, but they didn't get the jump ball. And Steph, after they didn't get the jump ball, like Eddie is saying, he just threw his arms in the air.
Thought
like
the mouthpiece was going into the second row again.
What is happening over here?
So
it's kind of like the wave. You know, if you're at a ball game, he kind of did the wave.
Basically.
In frustration there.
So, on the one hand, the superstar needs the shot. And they're doubling him. I get it. But I want Steph to get that back with 8 to play and do or die by him.
Well, if they're doubling Steph, you should be able to get a better shot than 28.
Correct. On the other hand, and I haven't heard this mentioned at all. I didn't hear it mentioned from Channing. Haven't heard it mentioned a ton nationally. If you follow the Warriors closely or you follow the national narrative around Jordan Poole, it is not quite high volume as Steph, but just as confident and just as consistent. They have dubbed him as a mini Steph in Golden State. Oof. That's the level of confidence that he has. So you accompany all the factors that Eddie mentioned in there, plus like Halliburton said, he had an open look. I'm not surprised at all that he took it because it's the thing he's seen his running mate do all the time. Only difference is, more often than not, his running mate makes it. And his running mate is the greatest shooter of all time. So, on the one hand, I want to be like, oh, how can you take that shot? But how can you not if you're Jordan Poole? Because that's who you think and you've been told that you are. You're just as valuable to this team. You can make that shot. Draymond's defending him today on the podcast.
Wow, Dre came to the defense over there. I'm surprised he didn't punch him in the face. But to your point, Jay Poole, he was 6 for 11 from 3 last night, and he scored 21 points. So if you've hit 6 threes in a game, you're feeling it.
If Klay Thompson takes that 3, are we having this conversation today?
No, but it's Jordan Poole, and he's not as decorated.
I know that, and that matters.
Right.
But within that, just at times, Draymond aside, ego-free culture they live in, and they implore shooters to take open shots when they're confident. That's what happens sometimes. Sometimes you're going to get head-scratching shots, but because it's Jordan Poole, even though, like you said, he had a really great shooting night last night, and you asked on the analytical side what Dave Defour thought of it, he didn't have a problem with it. That's what's going to happen sometimes.
I think a couple of things make it worse is that the shot was nowhere close to going in.
No.
It was well off. Mm-hmm. If this is like in and out, I think that's a different scenario. Yeah. It wasn't even close. And, I mean, really, it makes my mind go here is, unless the player gets the job done, it was the wrong thing to do. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, Jordan Poole takes the shot, he missed it. What is he doing? LeBron James passes it to Kyle Korver or whoever. Korver misses, other players have missed. What are you doing passing it? Yeah. Why can't you be more like MJ? Like, unless you get it done, we hate the decision to do whatever you did. Yeah. That's just the way it goes.
Again, I still think it was the wrong move. Like, I'm getting the ball back to Steph somehow, but I get how it happened. I totally understand how it happened. And with how they've built that team, I don't think it's as ludicrous as it's made out to be, but you get the ball back to Steph. Let him make the decision.
I think what's interesting, too, is I always say this. I think you got to be first guessing before you're second guessing. That's where I would give Channing Frye and Taylor Rooks credit. They were like, what? They were questioning the shot selection before they knew he even missed it.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like, he pulled from 28, and they're like, what is he doing? And then he missed it. I like that they were first guessing before they just had a convenient second guess. Because, honestly, there are a lot of people watching that game last night. When he jacked it up, they're thinking, maybe it goes in. And he missed it. It's like, why would he take that shot? And they just reverse course.
I figured he was going to knock it down. I really did. Like, again, even though it wasn't Steph, just the way that Jordan Poole plays, and it feels like when they're going, everybody's going from beyond the arc. I thought it was going to go down. But yeah, it's you get the ball back to Steph. I wonder if Channing, like us, I'm mainly joking here, placed a live bet on Golden State, and that's why he's genuinely shocked that Poole decided he's going to be the hero that day.
You never know in this day and age, right? Wouldn't it be funny if Taylor Rooks was like, this screws up my two-leg parlay?
I had a same gamer, and it's gone now.
Yeah. What is he doing over here? Jay Cook's got picks around the corner. I'm going to eat some Fritos. We have to do a little exercise over here. Draft picks that initially were not well received at all. And those players went on to do great things. We'll do a short tale of the tape because we're just brainstorming in the moment over here. But I've got at least one player on my list. Might think of more. I'm Brian Noe. He's Jimmy Cook. It's 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
101.5 The Fan.
You know, there are harsh allegations, and then there's what Eddie Garrison just said. It's a different realm. It's a different stratosphere over here. I'm Brian Noe. He's Jimmy Cook here on The Fan. Do you realize what Eddie, hopefully, tongue-in-cheek was saying just a second ago off air?
Oh, it was tongue-in-cheek.
Okay, good. Because I was saying there's a lot of lying involved in radio. And Eddie, quick on the draw, said, your level of belief in Will the Thrill Levis, something along those lines.
Well, I didn't throw in the thrill. So, yeah.
I did. Sorry, I added that in.
He also didn't throw NyQuil in there either, though.
No,
so, he was neutral in that regard.
No, my belief is steadfast and genuine. Steadfast and genuine. But I'll tell you this. It is going to be really, really interesting. And hopefully the Colts are on the right end of this whole thing with these three quarterbacks in the same division. Imagine if they're not phenoms. There's no way, I don't think realistically, all three of them are going to be true franchise difference makers. But let's say they're good enough. You mentioned Tannehill. Say they're good enough to hold the starting job for a while. You know how fun that's going to be to really compare and contrast these guys in the same division? How many matchups they're going to have with one another? It's going to be really intriguing if they pan out to the degree of they're the starters for a lot of seasons.
If you're a neutral or if you're just a fan of the AFC South, you just enjoy the rivalries or the history there as a whole, yeah, that's what you want. You want everybody to pan out. Of course, selfishly, if you're a Colts fan, you want Richardson to be the best of the bunch, but that's an added element that's going to follow around the fan bases, the front office, and the player themselves until they either get cut or they make it big.
You know, I'm in a tough spot here, Jimmy, as I do the math here, because no one likes I told you so guy. Indianapolis fans would despise I told you so guy if Richardson doesn't pan out to be better than Will Levis. I'm a truth teller. What do I do if I'm filling in? Just bite my tongue? Just say,
let's not pretend like that's even on the table. Come on. Come on. Who are you sparing? Come on. If we fast forward 5 years from now, even if I was you, I would almost do it. Even if 5 years from now, it's not us in here, it's just whoever.
Yeah.
Call in the day that whether Levis wins the Super Bowl, whatever. You don't have to reveal who you were. People know. They'll know. Surely not. That wasn't Brian Noe that just called in, was it?
I just wanted to call in here, just real fast. A couple of things off the top of my mind.
I'll grab a movie reference, a B+ movie at best. We'll go Will Smith, iRobot. Sometimes I told you so. Just doesn't quite cut it. That's what you're hoping for in terms of your potential projections for what these prospects pan out to be.
How about this, Jimmy? Before we get to your picks, how many guys have been drafted and the fan base hated the selection initially, and that guy went on to do some great things or have a really strong career? One of the first guys off the top of my head was Porzingis with the Knicks. They hated that pick, number 4 overall. And they're like, who's this? Latvia? What? They lost their minds. And the next thing you know, he's actually good. Like you said, he's known as the unicorn. He had several strong seasons for the Knicks until they traded him away. That's one that comes to mind. Who's on your list?
Yeah, the one that you and I kind of talked about during the break. I wasn't alive for this, but I've seen all the docs on it, and I grew up in the back half of his career. But I think back here locally when, is Steve Alford going to wind up with the Indiana Pacers, make that trip from Indiana Hoosiers now over with the Pacers, and instead they go Reggie Miller. And at least within the documentary and the way it's painted is just universally pan, why would you not take Alford, yada, yada. Ended up working out very, very well for the Pacers. It's not a large limb to say at all. Their greatest player in franchise history. Going to get a statue, you would hope, one day out there if that's the kind of thing he wants that the Pacers would do. So that's the prime example for me with the local tie-in.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting, right? Because there's so many layers to that. I'm sure there are many players that if I really sat and thought about it, recent memory, in the past, where the fan base, it's changed with the NFL draft, how it goes place to place. Even if a fan base hates their selection, because it's their 1 year to have the draft, I feel like it's overwhelmingly more positive. Yeah. If this is in New York, on an annual basis, and they're like, what are we doing? This is the worst draft pick ever. I think that the setup is a lot different. You don't get as much venom anymore when it's place to place.
I missed that a little bit because it would always be a large conglomerate of either Jets or Giants fans that were just in despair because of whatever selection that they made.
Ooh, you know, one that was a great negative reaction and actually turned out to be correct was the Dolphins when they drafted Ted Ginn Jr. They drafted him 9th overall instead of Brady Quinn. Brady Quinn didn't go on to be a great pro, but at the time they needed a quarterback, and they went with Ted Ginn Jr. And like the draft party or whatever in Miami, they lost their freaking minds, and they were right. they were right, but it happens. All right, let's get to the picks here.
The Jay Cook Plays of the Day.
This is me, all right? I'm not an athlete. This is my way. This is how I win.
Enough yapping, says one Eddie Garrison.
Enough yapping.
He said, let's get to the picks here.
I was like, let's get to the picks. Let's. And then he's like, yeah, let's get to the picks.
Eddie to take the shot, he takes the shot.
Hey, I get it. I have no problem with that.
Like Jordan Poole plays for today. We're going to scoop the 8 on the Philadelphia 76ers in Boston against the Celtics. Laying 1.5 on the run line for the San Diego Padres against the Cincinnati Reds. Give me the Cleveland Guardians on the money line. That's minus 125 for them. Minus 130, by the way, for the Padres in that regard. Minus 125 Guardians in New York against the Yankees. Shane Bieber on the mound, I beg your pardon. And closing things out, over 29.5 total points for Jason Tatum tonight.
Whoa. What was the Padres bet?
1.5 run line.
Yeah, that's fair.
Run line.
Okay.
That's fair.
Yeah. 1.5 run line.
They've got a reliever on the mound, so yes.
3-2 yesterday, 6-4 on the week. Plays on Twitter.
You go 30 for Tatum tonight at least?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Need big game for Tatum tonight.
Embiid going tonight, reportedly.
He's 24.5, and I'm tempted to go over, but if you think, hey, he's going to be limited, it's plus money if you go under. It's like plus 120, I think, if you want under 24.5 on Embiid. I'm not touching that, but just throw it out there for you.
I was going to take the over on that one because he's feasted on Boston all season long.
You know, it's great to be back in a state that allows legalized gambling.
Welcome back. I dread every trip, even though I get over it once the plane lands, but I dread every trip to Florida where it's like, okay, I want to put in a couple bets, particularly if it's like during big sporting events, playoffs, whatever. Got to get some bets in, and then you can't adapt or make the change. There's no live betting. There's nothing. It's just zen of acceptance that I made my bets, and whatever happens, happens.
I touched down in Florida, and I was like, I'm pretty sure this is not
it's over.
Gambling state. Let's try. Enter. Nope. Rejected like Dikembe. And so I'm back. I'm back, baby.
What's your first wager? Have you placed one
I don't
yet?
know. Yeah, I have no idea. We just booked it over here to do the show, and I feel like I need to put some plays on Twitter as well.
Yeah, might as well.
What's your worst play that you've posted on Twitter before?
There's been heavy favorites where I've gone take for example, last night when I went all Warriors. And then I go minus 190. I'm like, hey, it's fine. They're not going to lose at home game one. Like, they're going to carry this. The shooting's going to be off the charts. Doesn't pan out. Like, those are usually, and I've tried to get away from that because I like more value plays. I like more bang for my buck. But sometimes if it's still in the hundreds, it's too tantalizing if you have a powerhouse like Golden State or a Bills and Josh Allen or something like that. It's tough sometimes.
I wonder where you guys stand because nothing makes me feel dumber than when I go with a big favorite and they might lose outright. Yep. That's the worst. It is the worst. If you lay a decent amount of change to win a little bit because you're like, they're not losing this game outright. And they are. Yeah. They're losing it outright. I think that's the worst.
Yes. No, it's gut-wrenching, not just for the value that you likely play to be able to get something back, but also because then you start to be, how could you possibly be that wrong on that? How could you have not seen the value and the juice available for LA at plus whatever it was, 180 or wherever the mark was last night? So,
you know what? Here's a question for you before we get out of here. We were talking about the draft picks and the negative response. Mm-hmm. Would it be Levis if the draft were in Tennessee would have gotten the most negative response?
Oh, I think there would have been boos.
I think there would have been too. Can you think of anything else that's close to that? Maybe if it's in Detroit and they go with Jahmyr Gibbs, I don't know, maybe they hope he's the next Barry Sanders or something. Like, is there anything that would be more?
No, because of the Hendon Hooker tie.
Yeah.
You have to have the same college tie there for it to be that level.
Don't you feel ripped off that we don't have that now?
Yeah, I do. But it was fun in KC. Looked great.
We were so close. So close to that. Okay, Padres, what was it? Over?
-1.5 against the Reds.
Yep.
Okay. Really, against your Reds, huh?
They have
a
a bullpen pitcher they're trying to make a starter on the mound, yeah.
Let's go, Tatum. Fire him up over there. Enjoy JMV. We'll catch you soon.